The world is changing rapidly, and a new paradigm of leadership is emerging. A way of leading with more heart and soul. And on this fifth season of the Vulnerable Power Show, we share the practical insights, leading edge skills, and potent wisdom to equip you for this future paradigm unfolding today. Learn from visionary leaders, spiritual entrepreneurs, innovative founders, all who have done the inner work and soul searching to transform and step up into their calling and mission, leading with their vulnerable power. These soulful and heartfelt deep dives will teach you how to develop self-mastery, step into your soul's calling, embrace your gifts and genius, and lead from a service-oriented mindset, so you too can be empowered to do this transformative inner work and step up as the ascending leader you came here to be. Together, let's bring more heart and soul back to leadership around the world. Greetings, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome to the start of the fifth season of the Vulnerable Power Show. Here, where we deep dive into the heart and soul of leadership, spotlighting leaders from around the world that have done the deep inner work to rise up in service, stepping into their mission, what we would call a higher calling, or what I speak to as ascending leadership. And today we have with us a very special guest to launch this first episode of the fifth season, a very seminal topic with a colleague that I would say embodies not only ascending leadership, something that I would say is more of the mystical pragmatism that's going to be imbued in today's episode. And in this emerging paradigm, so many of us leaders are searching for the new way of being and leading, with everything being upended more and more in this paradigm shift. So today, on this first episode, with Roxanne joining us, we're going to drop in to a very foundational, very seminal topic, this topic of holding space, which seems very elusive, even to me, holding the space on the show as a host. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Roxanne and drop into the beginning of the episode, the beginning of the season, and starting off with holding space. So welcome again, Roxanne. Thank you for being here and sharing of yourself.
My joy to be here with you and all who are following you, Haas.
Yeah, and you're knee deep in I would say in the field, or what you speak to as I think the word you used before, web of life, this notion of a book sabbatical and dropping into the fourth book, which we're going to touch upon, which is really the cornerstone of where the topic came about today, this notion of holding space. And before we get into that, I love to get into some of the background of how you became such an impeccable space holder and were guided to some of the stepping stones to this fourth book and the topic we're going to introduce. So if we can kind of rewind a little bit and then rewind a little bit more before that. And I wanted to start with how I met you, the Deep Living Lab, the very beautiful baby that you co-founded and came through. So if we can start there. How did this come about? Because that was really the intersect of you and I meeting, and then we'll go from there.
And we're so happy that you came to the lab, Haas. The lab is an emanation that came from a book that I wrote. Well, the first version was in 2013, and then a revision in 2020 called Deep Living with the Enneagram. And that book actually followed another book that I had written, which is called Deep Coaching, using the Enneagram as a catalyst for profound change, and working with leaders, coaches, professionals globally from that coaching school. And it's interesting because I'm just backing up one more step, that the book for the coaching came first, and then I went, well, really, what about for people who are not necessarily wanting to go into school or are not coaches, but are leaders? And of course, leaders also have a coaching role. But what about everyone else? And so I thought, I kind of do things backwards a lot of times. So the Deep Living book is really, it's quite a tome. It incorporates a lot of life issues that are reflected in the Enneagram. So it's not like the Enneagram is something that we have to, a framework that we have to put on us. It's like it just reflects what actually happens behaviorally, emotionally, mentally, in the evolution of our souls. So I had some colleagues who had been students at one point who said, with the publication of that Deep Living book, how can we help you? How can we help you figure it out? And I said, well, I don't know, because that wasn't my focus. My focus is really on, at that time, my coaching practice, the coaching school at the time. And I hadn't thought about, okay, how are we going to further its reach? And so we met for a while, a group of us. And eventually, a colleague, Irma Velasquez, said to me, well, I think we need a real organization behind this. What do you think? And we agreed, like, we need to bring this out. We need to, some people would say play bigger, but it's really, it's this expansiveness and wanting this work, which is really a force for love in the world. It's really bringing forth self-awareness in a way that is embracing and compassionate and courageous and caring, and leads to a real shift in how we understand ourselves. So it's very transformational work. So we began, and then this next piece of work, which we'll be talking about more, the Four Sacred Portals, which is this upcoming book. This work continues to flow. It's like I was gifted, I was gifted with this work, and if I were to go back even a little further, the reason I know that I've been gifted is because when I was first introduced to a more transformative approach to the Enneagram, I sat in a retreat class. It was a week long. And on the first night of that class, I'm sitting with 60 people. I don't think I knew anybody in the group at that point. And I really didn't know the Enneagram very well, but I just knew that there was something there, at least for me, if not for the people I work with. And, what happened was I felt invisible arms around me. Now, I just have to say, I wasn't a person that had a lot of those kinds of really transcendent experiences at that point, but I actually felt arms like around my shoulders and then kind of shaking me, saying, this is your work. And then I heard it, Haas. I heard it a second time. It's like, if I didn't get it the first time, maybe you'll get it the second time. This I can still feel these hands, and I can hear this voice. This is your work. So that's actually the very beginning of the Deep Living Lab, because I said yes, and I didn't know what I was saying yes to. I had tears running down my face. Like, what is this? And it took me quite a while to actually recognize what I was stepping into, what I was actually saying yes to.
It's the permission slip, the proverbial yes. I love that you brought this out, this mystical experience, so out early in the interview, because would you say, I liken those moments to initiations. And it feels like, and I like how you also added in early on that you weren't a person that had this regularly. It was, and in the Western society, it's not, something that sadly it's becoming maybe more of an emerging understanding that there are these hidden realms beyond the material senses, because you even said it, there was something there. I sensed it. And then this visceral initiation, this activation of energy happened. Can you, from your perspective, because you even spoke to what we're going to get into more and more already, this notion of how it bursts through us. We say yes, we don't know what we're saying yes to. Looking back, would you say that was, and how would you speak to it? An initiation, hindsight's 2020. What was that mystical experience, looking at it in hindsight? How would you encapsulate it, characterize it, so to speak?
Yeah, I had actually participated for years, probably even 20 years before this happened. I'd been in mystery schools, I'd been in transformative work, but I never felt it. I never had a really deep experience of it. It was more intellectual, or more like, oh yeah, trying to kind of transform out of myself into something else. And I found that it doesn't, for me, it doesn't really work that way.
Mm,
So this experience, I felt like, I was probably being prepared for a very long time for
mm,
this work, and I just didn't know it. And then when I decided to go to this week-long training, um, the sense was like, yeah, you said permission slip. It was as if I was being invited into something,
mm,
and initiation is a really great word. I've been I was prepared. I didn't know I was prepared. I didn't know what I was saying yes to, but I felt so supported
mm,
in it, even though I couldn't say what the it was, and at that point, what it was actually supporting me. But I trusted it, and that's a big part of this whole journey is that, we get little bits and pieces along the way. Sometimes we get big bits and pieces, big steps to take along the way. We each have our own journey. But in this case, I really sensed that there was something so real for me that I suppose I had a choice. I could have said no, but it would have been at a high cost to my
mm,
soul. I mean, like I didn't really have a choice if I wanted to continue moving in the direction of becoming freer from the constraints, my limited sense of self, for example. So initiation is a good word to put with it. It was an initiation of uh, trust, trusting myself enough,
mm, mm,
trusting myself enough that I I'm going to be led. I'm going to be supported. I'm going to be guided. But it wasn't conceptual. It was
mm.
just not conceptual. It was happening to me at a different level of consciousness, a different level of, okay, you better help me
Mm.
along the way.
Well, I mean, that's why I call these deep dives. And that's why I mean, deep living lab, deep living, the book, deep coaching. I mean, there is this notion that you're touching upon that you have to have a deep visceral experience where we feel it, which transcends the mind. I mean, you've been in these esoteric traditions, spiritual traditions. You've been doing this transformative inner work, and there is this being prepared notion that you're speaking to. And I love what you spoke to it as a choice point is what I believe they call it more and more in the spiritual nuance of we have these timelines and we have these like almost like a choose your own adventure book from, a few decades ago where you have a door to choose. And I like what you said, some are unavoidable, some are inevitable. And I believe one of my teachers said, how far up the mountain is fate. You have so many paths to get to that point. Some paths are predestined. And I love how you're already bringing this out. What was it like? Twofold question to kind of bring through this notion of birthing something. I mean, you're a founder essentially of a curriculum, a framework, an institute, a school, however you want to word all of this. So you've birthed this through and you're already speaking to it. Twofold. What was it like to face these edges? That when we're birthing, much like when we're birthing a literal baby, whether it be a curriculum, a technology, something we're going to see a lot in this season, what was it like? How did you deal with growing into and embracing? And earlier you said expansiveness, I believe. So what was that like? Or, how, any tips, anything you can speak to from your personal experience of opening past those edges energetically and developing early on? Because again, you're challenging. I sense some of the audience and I know I was early on like you were. What is happening? What's going on? Now you can make sense of it and say all of the beautiful things when I asked you that you've said in hindsight. So, what was it like going through it to grow into it, whether it be the discomfort, etc.? And then with that, allowing the support, something that I keep hearing you said it, I hear others say it, this letting people help you, letting people nudge you, whether that be in this domain or the universe supporting us. If you want to speak to those, I feel like they're very seminal for founders early on, is how to deal with that, how to allow in the support, and how to deal with the discomfort.
Oh my goodness, the discomfort was enormous. And actually, um, I had started, I had already started coaching, and I felt like I wasn't getting to the core
Mhm.
issues. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to explore the Enneagram for me, but I thought, oh, if it can help my clients, that's great too. But what I was led to was writing that first book, Deep Coaching, using the Enneagram as a catalyst for profound change. I had a full coaching clientele at that time. And I would be writing at 11 o'clock at night, and I go, what in the heck am I doing? And the inner critic came up in big ways, like, well, if you know this, everybody else probably already knows it. So why are you doing it? And what I came to, what really helped, and maybe this will help, the leaders that are here with us, that I decided that I wasn't writing for anybody else but me. And for me, writing is a way that I learn, that I integrate, that I synthesize, that new insights come. I mean, it's a spiritual practice. I couldn't have told you that at the time, but it is a spiritual practice for me. And so I'd be up, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and writing. And I would say, I just have to do this because I need to understand it. And that was really powerful. And then, we'll probably get into this later, but I'm a little hard to get through to at times. And there was a friend I was coaching, but I wasn't thinking about a coaching school. I have an academic background. I used to teach at the university, so I know about curriculum and all of that. But I hadn't quite translated that. And a friend of mine said, "This is where our these little voices come in." This friend, we were walking in town one day, and she said, "Well, you're a teacher, you're a coach. Why don't you do a coaching school?" Like, duh, So I had to be open to hearing that, and so I started teaching, and then, taught people from around the world, and coached people and mentored people from around the world in a presence anchored approach to coaching, but because now the book was real, and then and my gosh, I wrote the second edition of it that came out in 22. So I had it 15 years later. I had a second edition with about 40% new material because I learned a lot in that time. But it was really step by step by step. I didn't have a long trajectory. I didn't know where this was going, and which is really counterintuitive to a lot of people who, they're wanting to initiate something. And it's like, well, you do this step, and then you do this step, and then you do this step, and you have this long plan, a 5-year plan or 3-year plan, which really at this point in time, we kind of know that things get thrown up in the air pretty fast. And so those plans probably may not be sustainable. But what I found was I was actually meeting what was coming to me and what was showing up to me. And I had to learn to pay attention to that, because I too thought, well, what else should I be doing? And I was looking at other options. I could be doing that. I could be doing that. And it's like, it's what was coming to me. And I had to honor that. So that's a very counterintuitive way of approaching the development of something, because I actually couldn't have said at that time, oh, this is the beginning of a movement, but it actually has been the beginning of a movement. And it just has taken different routes along the way with the lab, Deep Living Lab. But, I would say that I let the universe guide me. And I actually had a client say to me recently something like, well, I've learned that, and she was dealing with trying to let go of trying to control everything. And she says, I've learned I can trust the universe will show me the next step. And I went, yes, that's right. It will. But boy, that's a big trust. That's a lot of trust. But that's where we are. That's what we're being asked to do.
Indiana Jones standing there, Harrison Ford, the last crusade, right? Sean Connery's his dad behind him. That's what I'm seeing as you're saying all this, because it's a messy, nonlinear process, this birthing through, this starting a movement, starting a school, starting a founder. And I love this. because right away we're already getting into a lot of the undercurrents of holding space, of churning the locus within. You're talking about a very seminal thing. This is uncomfortable. You're going to have the inner critic. Who am I to do this? They already know this. Imposter syndrome, all sorts of things that
All
you're
that comes
touching
out.
on, beautifully worded. And then it seems like for you, it was like, I'm going to do this for myself. I had that pivot only a couple years ago because, again, it's if we focus outside, that can be so topsy turvy. And I love this. One colleague calls it divine breadcrumbs, these nudges along the way. And it seems like, again, noticing another undercurrent that we're going to bring up in holding space and churning inwards. You had to pay attention and be like, and be embodied and present in that awareness to be like these nudges that you were speaking to. Oh, what's happening? This coaching client, this friend. Hey, maybe it's a school, maybe it's this. And allowing so much. We're going to talk about the current, let's say, this web of life that you call it, this flow that the universe. And if you don't, like in that movie analogy, if we don't take that first step, because it's nonlinear. And I love that. And you brought up something early that really vibrated me. I'm writing in the middle of the night, going to this messy nonlinearness because so much of society is built around a 9 to 5. So much of the element of
Yeah.
this show, the 5 years going into this fifth season, is about showing this new way so people can take the leap and step into what they're here to birth through. Or as you're going to speak to later today, rise up to whatever the universe wants them to bring through. That is very interesting that you brought up because if I'm correct in hearing what you meant, was it part of you going, I have work in the morning. Why am I up in the middle of the night? And
Yeah.
what am I writing? Is that correct? Did I pick it up
Yeah,
correctly?
exactly. Like, well, I do know now that I can't start working with clients until maybe 10 a.m., right? So that I can get a little bit of sleep in. But actually this work was reverberating, through
Hmm.
me. And it's like it was hard to actually put it down and to figure out some way to
Yeah,
to organize it because it's there's a lot, there's a lot to it.
I love that.
And so the approach um really was, I still had to stay with what was coming to me. And it took me, so this is another thing, and people don't like to hear this, it took me 5 years to write the first book. It took me 5 years to write my second book. This last one, well, we can talk about how long this has taken. But so what I want to say is the universe, our soul, our heart, they all that operates on a different
Hmm.
frequency, a different wavelength, a different, totally different timeline than what our ego operates on. I have to have this done, within 3 years. This has to be done, or within a year, or within 6 months, whatever the ego wants to put on it. It's like, well, it can happen. It does happen. It happens for a lot of people, but there's a different quality to it.
Hmm.
And my experience is it tends to be more at the surface level.
Hmm.
And if you can become a partner with the universe, so a co-creator with the universe, letting the personality patterns, the ego desire for control, you can let that soften. And there's ways to do that. We have the technology, the human technology, to shift how we approach life. And if we can, rather than trying to be the one, going solo or even with a group, we're going to make this happen. Yeah, you might be able to make it happen, and you might be very successful. How's your heart?
Hmm.
And what's the quality of your life, internally? And so I I have to say I trust the universe.
Hmm.
I trust what shows up, and it doesn't mean I like it all the time. Doesn't mean I prefer it all the time. But there's something that I'm not seeing. I have to recognize that I can't see the whole picture, and I sure didn't see it when I started this
Hmm.
work, Huss.
It's a gestation process, hence why birthing it through is what I'm referring to it as, and we'll see it later in the season with Gail, who is an inventor, because it really, what you're talking about, hit home. I declared I'm going to have my curriculum up in a year. It's taken 3 years to birth this thing through. You have to be, and you said it earlier, you have to be prepared for it. You're going to be cooked by it. You're going to be, the dispenser, the transmitter, the instrument of this. So healer, heal thyself, as they say, right? You have to allow it to do its work on you so you can then guide the others through it. And what we're going to get into, right? How do you get into this non-personal awareness and the Enneagram, what we're going to dive into in a few. Very powerful tool that I sense for you, and you're bringing it forward in different ways, and we're going to unpack it even more in a few minutes. So let's go into a dovetail that I had that you already are into. What's it been like to down what I call downloading, developing, birthing through this concept of being able to assemble the pieces? And earlier you even said something, it's a lot, it doesn't organize in a linear way, my words. What's it been like to go deep into the field or into this inner state? And you're lucky because you're in the midst of it, as I teed up. You're in this book sabbatical, kind of an immersive state of focusing on organizing and birthing it through, kind of furthering what we're already gelling on. What's that been like in terms of how have you, and you even said it a moment ago, a few minutes ago, you said, now I know better about myself. I don't start till 10 a.m. These are things that you've developed and it's developed mastery over yourself. And Enneagram is a tool that we're going to unpack later that helped you get there. Talk to us about what's it been like to tap in, tune in, churn on, as you know, Watts and them and some of these others would say, to get into these states of downloading, birthing it through, organizing it. What the heck is this? However you want to gel on this to, again, kind of round out the founding process, the bringing it through process.
Uh, yeah, I work somatically a lot, and so I'm working with my body. I'm listening
Mm,
to my body. And so one of the things that I use is a mat, a floor mat that has a symbol on it. And you've been talking about the Enneagram, so using the Enneagram as a major symbol. And my new work, which has been 12 years in the unfolding and gestation, and like it's going to be coming out soon. At least part of it. At least part of it. Probably not the whole shebang because there's a lot there. But I sit with the mat. I walk the mat. I feel into myself as I'm walking it. That because it's not just a two-dimensional image. It's not even just a three-dimensional image. Symbols can be imbued with a lot of energy, and while not what do I say? They're imbued with a lot of energy that can support what wants to come through. And because I'm somatically oriented, and grounding, I do a lot of grounding, and with the earth, pulling in earth energy. I also pull in my guides. I have, unseen guides that support my work. And when I connect and invite in my guides, my work goes a lot smoother. I don't know that it goes faster, but it goes smoother. It's like more real. It's like, oh, I wouldn't have gotten that that little insight. So it's like it helps me to get downloads, even if and the way I get downloads is probably different than other people. Right. We all have different ways that comes in, but for me it comes in like, oh, this lands for me. That's one way I get it. If this lands for me, so it's not so conceptual. So, and I often have to do it solo, and then there's times I do it collaboratively too, because I have buddies, that are working with this too, and learning this material and working with it, and they get their own hints and insights or perspectives, which is always helpful. Again, I would say that it's I'm trusting. There's just a lot of trust, and there's a lot of heart connected with this too. And even with this newest work, that came in a ways that was so unexpected to me. So it was another time when, oh, here's this new map, that we're presenting to you. And it's like, oh, so what do I do with this? A lot of time I'm in the unknown. I will just say that. A lot of time I am in the unknown. And it's only with taking the next step, writing the next words, getting the next paragraph down, or something happening. And it's like, oh, okay. Oh, that informs me. But I'm not going in with a lot of In fact, I'm not going in with preconceptions because what I'm doing now is really nobody else has done. And even with the Enneagram, a lot of people write about the Enneagram. And when I first wrote about it, there weren't that many people writing. Now it's like all over the place.
Hot
But
topic.
it's a hot topic, and I'll just say sometimes it's uh, not the way it was intended, initially by Gurdjieff, the mystic who brought the Enneagram symbol forward right before World War I. He said, if we don't wake up, we're going to be killing ourselves in the hundreds of thousands. So,
And what was the wake
yeah.
up? You said that to me once. What was the wake up from what exactly? Since you brought it up already, the Gurdjieff point. Wake up
Oh,
from,
well, waking up from the slumber, waking up from the way I say it now is
yeah.
it's waking up from who we think we are.
I believe once you
We
said the slumber of our personality, right? Is that at one time you said?
Yeah, that's who we think we are. We think the tendency, particularly in the Western culture, is to say this is who we are. And then we get what we say identified with it, Haas. Identified with it means that we're holding on to it, right? And we're holding on to an idea of or holding on to a way that we've always responded, feeling like we have a right to act the way we do, even if it might cause harm. The personality is, what the personality is. And this blew me away when I first learned this over 25 years ago. Personality is really a coping mechanism. The personality develops a series of patterns, emotional patterns, mental patterns, behavioral patterns, as I mentioned before, and that cover up the wounds that we had when we were small. Because we didn't have the capacity, every one of us, there's not a person listening or watching that hasn't had early wounding. And we weren't prepared. We didn't have the reservoirs. We didn't have the background. We didn't have the experience to know how to deal with those wounds. And so the personality did a great job covering all that up. And so that's what's underneath the personality, that those drivers. And so we become identified with it and thinking that this is on the surface of our life. This is who I am. And shouldn't everybody be like this? And if they're not like this, well, let me show them how. This is the way to be. Because it feels like the personality provides a version. I think I call it a splinter of our splinter of reality, like what we think. This is what reality is, and that's the blinders are created through the personality of how to define what life is about, and so we get identified. We think that's who we are. We become unconscious. We ignore a lot of things and things that don't fit into our way of seeing, believing, thinking of who we are. There's a lot of data that doesn't agree with it, but we ignore it. The personality is it has a profound way of ignoring that other data. We're not making the personality bad. It may sound like it. And that's
you're defining it, and we're going to keep going into it later. It's patterns, right? And it's coping
just patterns
that then even in the neuroscience, they're calling it the default neural network that we kind of
Yes.
go, that's me. Michael Singer does a great job in his books on that. Like, is it me or is that right? And you're diving into very powerful stuff that I love that when we use Enneagram, and we're going to unpack it in a little bit, it really, like you're saying early on, really shows us who we are. And it's not this sliver of this coping mechanism, AKA the cult of personality. So let me go back a little bit. So it sounds like here's your process of organizing and tapping in, tuning in, and birthing through and making sense of the unknown, as you put it. You didn't say it this way. It sounds like the preliminary step, and Enneagram and all this deep inner work has definitely prepared you for it, is to be blank, no expectations. You go into a somatic work. Each person is, as we've said, you said it brilliantly, is going to be different. So this seems to be some ways you found your pathways and rhythm. You do grounding. I love how you spoke to working with guides or the hidden dimensions, bringing out heart and trust, that Indiana Jones analogy, working solo, working sometimes with buddies or peers, and step by step, keep going. It seems like these breadcrumbs, these nudges revealed as you did the next step, and then more came through, more assembled. And then you're getting into the core of today. How do we hold space? And I love what you're saying. We don't want to judge any of this, which is what we're going to really unpack later. Not fixing, not trying to use this to be a thing. Oh, I'm this thing, that thing, 9, 8, 7 on the Enneagram. Real quick, because you're speaking to something that is the preparatory to holding space, capacity, the ability to actually contain, hold the energetics of it. Real quickly, for the sake of time, the early stages of you developing your capacity to hold space. This background that I found riveting, fascinating when we met, your EDD, and then how you were working in rehab wellness for severe disability conditions, growing up around that. How did that ripen you as a preparatory? Because hindsight, as we've said, is 2020, and some of our early life experiences prepare us as much as the actual initiations and preparations when we're in the midst of the birthing through. How did that early life experience inform you in regards to capacity? Because for me, I found that as, oh, this is what helped Roxanne now. She had to work with this stuff early on to develop this muscle of capacity.
Well, that's a really great question, because this isn't all something that takes place. It's all out there and it's not grounded. It's like, this is life. We're talking about life right here. Right?
Life happens.
Life happens, and our life journey. And one of the things, and I'll answer your question, but one of the things that I often say to people is when they start judging themselves, which comes up all the time, in all kinds of ways, is that your journey has happened for a reason. Your journey is your unique entryway into a version and a more expansive version of life. But your journey is to be respected, to be honored. Not, there's a lot of letting go that takes place because we make a lot of mistakes, or at least I'll speak for myself. I made a lot of mistakes. I still do. But the journey is such an important part of, we are here in this body on this earth. And so we do have a journey. I mean, it's just, part of reality. So let me just say, I grew up, my dad had a hearing disability. He was mostly deaf in 1 year, actually both ears. So I grew up with that as a child, because he had that before I was born. And so I just learned something about differences there. And some of that was really uncomfortable for me as a little kid. I was pretty uncomfortable. That's when hearing aids had those, they were big and bulky, and, it's like, oh, my dad's different, and so that was kind of an early experience. But I eventually, when I went to college, I was a nanny for a family that had 4 kids. I had no idea what I was doing as a nanny, not know. But the reason I was hired is because their youngest one, I had spina bifida, and I didn't know what spina bifida even was, and I learned how to care for him and clean his colon openings and all of that when I was like 19, something like that, 20, I guess. And I did that for summers, a couple of years. And so eventually let's see how this worked. So I went, after I got my undergraduate degree, I moved to Southern California, beautiful San Diego. And I got a job with the first place I got a job with was United Cerebral Palsy. And I'll back up in a minute. But United Cerebral Palsy, I was working with young people, mostly young people, some young adults, some children, some were middle-aged with cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy. We lost a number of our clients who passed from muscular dystrophy during that time. And other developmental disabilities. And there was one person I just love to highlight. Her name was Terry. She had no control over her arms or her legs. She was in a wheelchair, and she couldn't speak. And she was a delight. She had this light in her eyes, and she attracted people in us. And what we ended up doing, there was a team involved with this. We ended up having her kind of write her life story. And she was maybe at that point 21, 22, maybe 23. And she was living in a nursing home because her father had left the home. Her mom couldn't take care of her. She was kind of a tall gal, but she was moving constantly. And she had a board in front of her on her wheelchair, and she had a head stick. And we sat with her. We took turns. We sat with her as she was very bright. She could read. She could understand everything. She wrote letter by letter. In some cases, there might have been like a picture of a house or something on her language board, but she would point one letter at a time, and we would record it. And it took months for her story to be finished. And that story became not only a little book, but it became the basis of a videotape. And that videotape the book was called Don't Just Look, with the idea that I'm so much more. And, doesn't that have a lot of resonance for today, in today's world? And there all the divisions in the world and our internal divisions, like, oh, this part of me is, that doesn't work quite like it. Maybe it should, or I think it should. And so we have these inner divisions as well as the external divisions. And she brought it together. She said, don't just look. There's much more to me. And that was shown to leaders across San Diego at the time, and, different social organizations, the Kiwanis and Mayans and all of that, Rotary. And it had an impact on people. So this woman who lived in a nursing home came to the center every day, but that was her life. From that experience, she impacted so many people. Her message has rippled out. So that was a profound experience for me. And I think I had a book way back when I was teaching at the university, and I believe I dedicated that book to Terry. And then I had an earlier experience that involved music in another environment where it was a residential center for what they called severely and profoundly retarded people. It's an awful, awful, awful name. And the people there were very limited, very, very constricted. Many couldn't speak. Some could. Some were mobile. A lot were not. And but we brought in a specialist in something called Orff Schulwerk. Orff Schulwerk. And if you have ever heard of Karl Orff, he was a composer, German composer. He created a set of instruments called instrumentarium. That was just the official name for these instruments to be used in schools, to have kids learn how to play instruments that easily harmonized with one another. It was brilliant. Well, some of those instruments came to this residential school. And with some of these children and young adults, and I remember one young adult, she had never talked, never said her name. And, as they were gathered into this circle and they were held, it was a safe place to be. And the instruments were introduced, one by one, and there were little rhymes that would go with some of the musical experiences. And I used to remember most of them because they were like baked into my mind. They were just simple little ditties in a way, but they resonated. And this one young girl, when she took this the mallet for what was like a xylophone as part of
Mm,
the instrumentarium. And she could play that. So she could hear it. And, and you could feel like there was something happening for her. Like there was this smile coming. Her body was smiling in a way.
mm,
And she was able to say her name,
mm.
which just blew all the staff out. It was like, what? So that's where, some of these are some of my early experiences where I learned about potential.
Mm,
And there's potential in every person. And I just so totally believe in that. And there's potential that is often hidden. And I just think that people with disabling conditions have been such great teachers for me.
mm,
Terry was an amazing teacher for me
mm.
because if I had just seen her um, and interacted with her from the way she looked, I would have been stumped. But there, I
Whew.
mean, right? I don't know
I
what would
like right
happen.
there. Okay. Tolerance, 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 tolerance. What I would call spiritual grit, for a lack of a better description. This notion of your capacity, that word, you said it earlier, this tolerance for differences, being able to see the disability, the disabled, the limitations as teachers, huge mindset shift. Thank you for bringing in the device, music to open up their soul. And I love it. You teed it all up by saying this is life. It's about opening up, holding space for ourselves, for life, for others. That's what we're really going to be getting into the meat and potatoes today. And you're bringing it out more and more. I see the tolerance, the capacity, and then this notion of you rising above it. Don't judge me. The title of her autobiography, let's say, potential. We're going to get real deep into that. Gifts, potential, rising up to use the Enneagram and other tools that you're going to bring forth. I love all of that because you seem to be also touching on this notion of you have to feel safe to open up. You had them in a circle, or I sense we're going to be talking about it this way, creating the conditions to cultivate
Yeah.
their potential. And we do that by holding space, the meat and potatoes of today or the crux of today. Thank you for sharing of that past. I know sometimes it seems tangential when I bring up the backgrounds of the guests. I only bring it up from an inspired place when it feels like, no, this seems to me like real synchronous and relevant. And I'm glad that you're bringing up so much in it. Yeah.
The other thing I guess I'd want to say about this, that it applies to whatever we're doing today, collectively, is that when we can see below the surface in other people and in ourselves as well, but when we can recognize that there's more there, there's the potentiality that always exists, that somehow that potentiality, when it's allowed to come forth, be expressed, right? That's what you're talking about, be expressed, that there is a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm really interested in too, is the ripple effect
Mm-hmm.
of connecting to our potential, but the deeper sources of who we are, not just, I mean, yeah, there's potential, in our ego self as well. Of course, we need our ego for lots of things, or our personality for lots of things, but from like who we are to, I mean, can you imagine this young, and she was a native girl. This was in Arizona. Um, Saying her name, first time anybody ever heard her say her name, to speak and just to express the impact that had on just the people, just maybe there were, I don't know, there were a number of staff around. And then, of course, I'm talking about it now, many, decades later, other people would have been talking about, there's a ripple effect here. And that ripple effect is it's such a part of this journey.
Mm. Well, I would say that from energetics, I mean, if you bring it through, if you get beyond the personality, the inner work, we're going to tap into how to get clear, release, let go of what we've been holding, these personality patterns, coping mechanisms. It sounds like to me, then you can bring through something real pure, something really divinely inspired, which is probably what you're witnessing and fascinated by, because then it would butterfly effect the fundamentals of entanglement. And then that, because it's pure juju, it's pure juice. You brought it down unjaded. You know what I mean? In that instance, I don't want to get too much into this. There's a parenthetical that for me, really, because you said it earlier with the divisiveness, differences, tolerating differences, working with limits and developing tolerance for differences. I'll confess, I would have found it difficult. I had a somewhat handicapped uncle, wasn't politically correct. I would use the word retarded up until even recently, and I've had to develop a lot of tolerance. I would have been in the room going, speed it up already. Not much tolerance. I've had to develop tolerance. I'll confess that vulnerably in my power. For those that were like old Haas, that had to go through the inner work that we're talking about, learning holding space, which we're going to talk about how that unpacks and the alchemy of it. What can you speak to now? You're naturally tolerant. This developed your tolerance. So you're, I would say, somewhat of an expert as far as I'm concerned. What would you say to those that lack tolerance? How can we work with limits and develop more tolerance for either its differences, if they're differently abled, whether it be limits, whether it be divisiveness, Israel, Palestine, I mean, whatever, tolerance, capacity to hold
Yeah.
this and not be, let the personality, all the stuff we're going to unpack in a little bit. How can you
Well,
speak to that? Yeah.
my first response to that is looking at your tolerance for yourself.
Woo! I love it. Keep going,
Yeah.
coach. Yeah.
It's true. I don't think that we can be tolerant uh, and have that capacity for tolerance for others if we haven't looked at ourselves and where we shut ourselves down, where we reject ourselves, where we resist parts of ourselves, which creates an inner divide. And that inner divide, of course, then gets expressed in all kinds of ways in the outside world, in the external divide and in every possible way. There's so the critic, the inner judge is central to that. And yet we can learn to change our relationship to that critic and not take it as God's truth, because it ain't. It just isn't. And it was set up to kind of protect it.
Do you mean
Go
God's
ahead.
truth as in I know better? Because that used to be my, let's say, pattern that like speed it up. This is taking too. Is that what you mean? That we attach or identify that this is God's truth? Can you elaborate? We'll
Well,
keep this going.
a lot of people hear the inner judge, the inner critic, as the voice of God. Honestly, that's an experience. So I brought that in, but it's that place where we belittle ourselves, where we dismiss ourselves, where we value ourselves. It's not that we're trying, or sometimes we even try to make ourselves better than others. The judge does that too. But it's a way of it. What it does, it evaluates. It's an evaluative voice, and evaluates us against some internal measurement that we maybe unconsciously carry. Like, I'm supposed to be better at this. I'm supposed to be stronger. I'm supposed to be more loving. I'm supposed to be more peaceful. I'm supposed to be a better achiever. So there's some internal measuring stick. And it doesn't even ever stay the same, because once you experience something, it's like, oh yeah, that was more like it. It's not going to be good enough for tomorrow. But so it's an evaluative part of our personality structure. It's very fundamental, also called the superego. And what our job is, if we want to actually move forward on what is important to us, what resonates with it, why we're here, to put into action what is dear to us, what we feel like are gifts, or what we are being asked to do in this life, then the judge is going to come up. It's guaranteed it'll come up. That's not a choice. You don't have a choice whether it comes up or not. The choice is how you respond to it. So if you try to make it go away, you're responding as if it's real. If you believe it, you're acting as if it's real. If you're trying to make it do something else, you're trying to negotiate with it, you're acting as if it's real. The inner critic is not real. It's a figment that feels real.
A
Yeah, it's a
construct.
construct, but it's a construct, but it can be in our bodies, it can be in our emotions, certainly messages we hear, and it feels like it's a real thing. It's not.
Real quick, I know we're getting down two rabbit holes. We're still on the tolerance. How would you
Uh,
distinguish that from the true voice? Because I love how you brought this in, and I see this in channeling, bringing through, let's say, light codes, all sorts of rabbit holes down the spiritual entrepreneurship arena, and we're in the same analysis. Your true voice versus this, what I learned from you all at Deep Living Lab, you, then shout out to Marcia, who'll be later this season. It sounds like, and you mentioned it, this is activated, this inner voice. It's not going to go away. We're not trying to get rid of it, more acceptance, embracing. We're on this topic of the tolerance with self. It sounds like it's activated in transformative growth, which I learned from you. You said it a bit tangentially today. So that's the inner critic: constrictive, evaluative, shrinking, judging, external, me versus them. What's the true voice from your perspective? So we can start to also say, is this a real channel or is this the fake channel, let's say?
yeah, that's a great question. Um, the true voice doesn't ever belittle.
Okay.
It just doesn't. It's not a negative evaluator saying you need to do this bigger, better. You need to change yourself in these kinds of ways. The true voice is generally quieter.
Hmm.
It is a little maybe harder to hear
Hmm.
because the inner critic voice can be so darn loud, right? And the inner voice has a certain resonance internally. So when we hear, it's like hearing this is your work. Um, this approach could bring more kindness into this relationship.
Hmm.
That's a different voice than tell that person blah 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 blah. The judge voice is often um, there's not enough you can do to make it right.
Hmm.
Okay. The true voice says, it's more like try this. The true voice is tolerant.
Hmm.
Us. The
Hmm.
true voice has patience.
Hmm.
The true voice is not trying to make you be something or do something that will hurt you or others ever. The true voice just doesn't work that way. But the inner critic voice
I was gonna
can
real
lead
quick.
us.
So recap: subtle. It usually phrases things in the positive. It's inviting, as in like maybe you can do this. You feel it. I love how you also highlight that it's resonant, like it's an embodied, like it lands. It's not disconnected, like the inner critic. And it sounds like there's an inclusiveness. Again, I'm doing my best to encapsulate, let's say, the variables or elements of how you can start to be like A/B test. Is this my constricted self?
Yeah.
Is this my true self, so to speak?
Yeah. And it's also compassionate.
Ooh.
That's one that it's actually one of the ways that we can meet our inner critic is with our heart.
Mhm.
And it's like, what's more true here than that statement I just heard?
Mhm.
And it's a very heartful, compassionate, there's a kindness, quality to it because it's not trying to beat you up. The inner critic is often, if you think about it, or if you really take time to, you know, uh, decipher it, there's a certain quality of having a hammer over you and or being tough on yourself. If anybody's ever said to you, you are awfully hard on yourself, they're talking about the inner critic having its way. So and what's interesting about this, the inner critic is often so much easier to listen to because we're more identified with it, Haas.
Yeah, it's attached to
We're
it.
more attached. We're more attached. And so when we bring our heart and allow ourselves to be compassionate with ourselves and meet ourselves from this other place, it's like this is different, and it can be a little harder. It's like, could this possibly be true? No, this can't be. You mean that I'm really uh, a truly generous person? No, I have to try so hard to be generous and
Mm.
loving, and I can't be generous and loving unless I do this and this and this. That's the inner critic. The true nature voice would be, no, what is true? What is really true? Look at yourself with clarity.
Mm.
With clarity. This is a whole set. We could go on and on.
Well, you can apply this, and you already gave two examples to your work, to the birthing process, because I'm now extrapolating it in a way that's different from other episodes. We did an episode on channeling. Jeffrey Eisen brought that through. So my point is, I love how you're discerning this in terms of how it showed up for you in a couple of the examples. This is your work where this will bring more kindness through. As you're birthing things through, it sounds like too, this could be useful discernment as much as it is for the inner growth category. So let's jump back to the main topic and wrap it up and then keep flowing. Tolerance starts with tolerance for self, healing the inner divide. The inner critic is what causes this inner divide. We went on this rabbit hole of inner critic versus true voice. Is there a second prong? Then I sense that first prong of once we heal the inner divide, it makes it much easier to deal with the outside. Is there any final tips or anything you've learned along your way for developing more of that with the working with others? So, and here's the kicker to addendum. So we don't disable them further. This is something I've had to learn. Being in power and authority in a way that honors others and not putting them down because of lack of holding, lack of tolerance, again, things that were all come together in an enchilada. Is there anything else in terms of then getting to the other intolerance, working with limits, exact in that vein, so to speak?
From my viewpoint, from my worldview, we are all connected.
Mm.
So if I'm doing my inner work and becoming more tolerant of myself, becoming kinder to myself, more compassionate with the messes I've made of things, with all parts of myself.
Amen.
Right? It is. Then, who is this person that I'm seeing? What is? I often see people as teachers, even though they may not look like teachers, right? Like, what are they? How could they be teaching me? What could they be offering me that I'm not seeing in myself? So because I see us as kin, I see us as interrelated, interconnected, that if I feel like I can't stand that person or I can't tolerate that person, then there's some part of me that's coming from. What am I not tolerating in myself? What am I not standing in myself? It comes from here. And then we project it. We project it out. So that's the reason this inner work is so powerful, because on this journey of life, think of all the people that we may have an impact on, and the ripple effect. And what if we were truly connected, which we are, but if we could begin to see ourselves as that person is not so different than me. There's something there that we share in common. And can I bring that person a little closer to me? I mean, so this is a whole body of,
right.
work, a worldview around not seeing that person as separate.
Right. Now, I love the way you brought that forth. It dovetails an episode we're going to see later this season with Virginia Robin in legal topic of how she talks about healing conflict internally. So I love how this preps us to kind of dovetail into that. Enneagram. Nothing more than Enneagram. I mean, I'm sure you've had other tools. Enneagram has popped up already. Let's get into it. Finding Enneagram, you already told us it was at this workshop. You got this proverbial tapping, a very occult secret society term. You were tapped, invisible hands on your shoulders going, this is your work.
It wasn't quite like that. It was more like, this is your work.
Well, yeah, again, that's the... Thank you. My inner critic wanted it to be all bells and whistles. And as my shaman teacher taught me, the most powerful divine magic is oftentimes subtle. It doesn't have the fireworks that we think inner critic.
No, that's really true. That is so true. It doesn't always have to be big. I mean, that was a very big experience for me, but a lot of times that it's a very small thing, that happens. It might just be walking along a river path and catching somebody's eye and smiling, that it's like, oh, something just happened. There's some kind of a lovely ripple. maybe never see that person again. So,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have to be that big. But okay, so
Enneagram.
I
Enneagram.
digress. I digress.
Yeah, no. Hey, I love it. You're feeling safe. You're flowing. Taurus North Node in the house. So this notion of the Enneagram, let's start with what is it in terms of the framework, and it is a tool. You've already started to highlight so many ways you've used it. So let's tee it up and then get us into Enya crossings, the portals, and the whole download of codex around it around this.
Well, let me see if I can do this in 3 minutes.
No, not 3 minutes. I didn't say 3 minutes. Where did you get
No,
the
you
3 minutes?
did. No,
Okay.
no. Well, because
That
it's
was
in
your inner
the.
critic, Roxanne. I invite you to consider that was arbitrarily placed. That is,
No, well, I said that because it's such an expansive body of work,
yeah,
right? But fundamentally,
yeah.
it's a transformative body of work that helps us see more clearly how we show up in life with our patterns. It illuminates those patterns in such a profound way. It's like, are you kidding? I thought that was who I am. No, that's not a pattern that is shared by 1/9 of the populations. There's 9 worldviews, 9 versions of the human
So
experience.
9 types, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's called types. That's right. It's called types.
Well, we got to be
And,
careful not to type or box ourselves in, as you were saying earlier on, and I'm sensing is going to come through even more.
yeah, exactly. That's the reason types is the usual language. Absolutely right. And I tend to stay away from it a little bit because
I love that.
that for a lot of people, that means, oh, I'm going to get put in the box.
Correct.
But actually what happens, and there was a book written around this a long time ago that said, you're not actually being put in the box. You're being released from the box that you didn't know you were in.
Ooh.
So you think about that, that the Enneagram shows us the unconscious ways that patterns exist in all forms of life, in, nature in so many ways. And these patterns are not necessarily negative unless they become our default way of being in the world. And then they feel like this is who I am. A pattern can be useful in certain situations, right? If I need to be really strong and bold with somebody who is overstepping their bounds with me, I can use a pattern that comes from a sphere of life, a type that is not where I typically live, but I can access it because it is needed at that time.
Okay.
But all right. So it's like we're not confined to one type. And that's anyway, the type is not who we are. In fact, it shows us who we are not. And as we learn about the patterns that are associated with each sphere of consciousness, each type, and when we land like that feels really familiar. I do that all the time. What do you mean that's a type? That is often a first reaction. That can't be a type. That can't be because that's who I am. Well, no, it's not. It's actually a type of the personality that is part of the coping mechanism. It's how you learn to cope in life. It's how you learn to be safe in life from the time you were small. So what the Enneagram's real gems, I guess, is that they show us what is underneath those patterns. Because it's not just the patterns. That's typically more on the surface level, but underneath the patterns are motivators. And what leads to these patterns? What are my beliefs that lead to these patterns? What do I try to avoid in my life? What do I try to pursue in my life? How do I meet life? How do my typical coping mechanisms? Those are, and the inner critic, by the way, are all forces that influence the patterns. So as we get into the influences and start working with those, that's where our healing occurs, because those are forces that again have helped us survive in life. And it's what we know. And it's part of the human condition. It's like, yeah, we are all born with some version of personality structure. So
It's a
that's one of the,
byproduct. It's a byproduct of being human. Because I love how like you're bringing this out the gate already. This is a tool to develop deep self-awareness and mastery. Essentially, is what I hear you say. That you use it as you're developing it even more to grow it beyond that. Because I'm hearing you say seeing the forces within that influence us. Released. I love this. Released from the box that we didn't even know we're in, and we're back to what you said earlier, Haas. How do we get to the core of these things that are driving us, these coping mechanisms that are patterns? And indeed, nature is cyclical. Things form patterns, grooves, energy starts to
yeah.
groove itself. And if you leave an ecosystem alone, and we're ecosystems, we're biospheres. So we have these, and I love it. You go below the surface, as we say in mediation land. So what can you say about the fixing? We talked about the types because I sense this is also something for you that's big. Because
Oh, that's big. Yeah.
yeah, and I had to learn this, right? Because I thought I was a healer and we have to heal. And, so let's talk about that really briefly, parenthetical, about this difference, let's say subtle distinction between embracing wholeness and fixing or healing ourselves.
Yeah. And let me just go back one point here,
Yeah, please,
because
please.
there's something else really important about the Enneagram.
Oh, sorry.
And that is as we are in the process of letting go of some of the energies that kind of drive our patterns, as we begin to release them, we become healed and realize where those came from. That the patterns are no longer so fixated. They're no longer something that drives us. And we actually open up, we create space within ourselves to experience more of our essential nature. So there's a whole continuum from being really restricted by the personality, by these patterns, to gradually letting go, opening up, and experiencing more of who we are. And then also that includes, like in a circle, being able to access responses to situations when they're called for, and not relying only on our default mechanisms. Okay, so your question.
So that's expansivist you're speaking to, is using the Enneagram to go beyond this, free up the energy. I love that, because yes, it's about then we use that energy, as we're going to get into, because I love this potential topic that we're going to really unpack in a few, about then using that. I mean, it's fundamentals of how I operate. And then you go, hey, let's use this energy here for growth, for potential, for rising up and bringing our gifts, genius forth, or birthing through what we're here to do. So yeah, I love
So
that.
this is part of the awakening process that we were
Yes.
talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
And that your G said, you have to wake up from your slumber, wake up from the personality, because it's going to kill us. And it has been, right? It has been collectively in this world. You think about it. And to be able to experience more of our true nature, our wholeness, which is so needed in the world.
Talk to us about fixing. Should we fix ourselves? Is this about fixing ourselves, Master
There's
Roxanne?
no fixing. There's nothing to fix. What a joke.
What are we doing when we do that? What do you sense we're doing when we do that?
Well, first of all, guess where that comes from?
The inner critic.
You got to fix this. You got to make this better. You got to be better about this. Come on, get on with it. Go. Get over it. Get over it. Come on, just get out there. There's so many messages from culture as well, and from our own inner critic that we've picked up from culture. Culture's picked up from us, I guess we could say, because there's that interaction that takes place. But one of the cruelest things, in my opinion, is that we feel like we need to fix ourselves. And, as a coach and as a teacher, this work and spiritual work for a very long time, one of the reasons that people would come to me, even though they might not say it out loud, is like, I want to be fixed. They might not say that, but they might say, I want to get along and I want to progress in my career. I'm not feeling like I've got what I need to progress in my career. Or they might say, I want to be a better spouse or better partner or a better parent, and so, I've been taking these parenting classes and I'm trying to, figure out, well, I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. And it's like, well, the inner critic it's not that there are, uh, we don't do things that can harm people. And so it's taking responsibility, for that. But there's a difference from a perspective of fixing. If we realize that what we can do is meet ourselves and be with ourselves and be able to sit with ourselves and recognize what's going on in here. And the Enneagram helps us see, what some of those issues are and how we can meet them kindly. It's not about fixing. It's really the healing process is so much about recognizing that we hold wounds within us. And those wounds lead us to feeling to try to hide ourselves and hide something about ourselves from ourselves and from others. And then that creates, well, there's something wrong with me. So there must be something wrong with me. I'm not doing this right. And that leads to the fixing. And that is throughout the self-help field. I mean, since I first wrote that, in the 2000, what was it, 7 book around deep coaching, it's like, I've seen this, not everybody, of course, not everybody, but there's been a great emphasis in fixing in the self-help field. And from my perspective, from my heart, that actually leads to more pain.
Well, if love and light was going to get us there, we would have already been there. So there definitely has to be some tweaking. And I love this. The power of words keeps coming up. And I love the way you choose to construct intentionally, like types in resonate, Haas. So I'm going to build upon this and I'm going to call it spheres of consciousness, as I believe the term you were using earlier. I wasn't planning on doing it in this order. We have a flow and an outline. Let's talk about this because you said it earlier on, the inner child within us, our childhood experiences, our early wounds, that these patterns, these influences that Enneagram helps us go below the surface. And there's so much we have to let go of. So before, I didn't think we'd do it in this order. So let's do it in this order since it's coming through. Before we get deeper into Enneagrams and the sacred portals and then getting deep into the home stretch of holding, let's talk about early life conditions and upbringing and how that creates these circumstances that we could call wounds. And specifically, I wanted to talk about when we first met, you spoke about your mother and something about how it influenced your suppression of your gifts. I feel like if we can bring that out, if you're comfortable speaking to that as an example, because when I first met you, you almost presented that as what you would call a wound, something that limited you, that was conditioned, cultural upbringing. We spoke about it earlier, things that influence us, and then we take on grooves, patterns, and personality. Can we get into that? Like, let's say what those early things do to us, and then maybe using your experience as the analogy or the case study. And I can speak to my own as well, because that's why I wanted to bring it up, because yours mirrored my upbringing and my mother wound in a way, so to speak.
Yeah. Uh, Gosh, there's much I could say. This connects to, when we're little, we take in the energy of what we might call our holding environment. All right. This is what, all right.
Yeah.
And my mother, up until, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, I don't know exactly the number of years, but we were not close. And my mom had a very limited education due to circumstances in her family. She ended up really working and almost being, this is a really potent word, so I use it carefully, but almost being enslaved by a member of her family to work in the fields and in the house. Because he wasn't married, and to do all the things that like a farmer would do, and she gave up a lot in her life to do that. She also told me, and I don't remember if I shared this with you earlier, but I think I probably did, Haas, when we were way back when preparing, that my mom, because she didn't have much of an education. She had an eighth grade education.
I remember you mentioned that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause my mom went up to around then too. So similar.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
ethnically, for ethnic reasons in Iran, my mom was similarly
Yeah.
conditioned,
Yeah.
shall we say, limited, shall we say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it was cultural too, although um, my mom's parents were from, um, oh my gosh, it's Bohemia, the Bohemia part of the Czech Republic, and from a
Hmm.
very poor area, actually.
Interesting.
So, and I visited there, so I've seen some of that history that her parents would have brought. Um, so she didn't have a real high regard for education. I mean, there was a part of her that I think wanted more for me, but there was a part of her that came out as what I saw in her human experience, her human expression, that not to stretch myself, not to try and take too much in, not to learn too much, not to stretch my brain, to keep myself small. And I also thought that it's my dad, don't be seen, don't be
Wow.
seen. So,
Wow.
so I had quite a few messages about that, which is,
So how did that shape you? Let's speak to this concept then. How, because you also said, we're going to bring it up later, your holding environment. I love how you
yeah,
brought it up too, because it's two things that are dovetailing. Right now, we're speaking to how it shapes us when we unpack holding. Audience, remember, she's also describing this is also how we learn how to hold space, which we're going to get to. So how did that shape you? Both the mother and the father giving you that input that we so readily take on as kids. How did that shape
um,
you as a leader, and how did that teach you how to hold space? And then how did you have to clear that?
well, I had to do a lot clearing,
Yeah,
right? Because
right.
because I took that on as you don't make yourself too visible. Don't rock the boat. Don't let there's you don't want to be the target. That's kind of what I heard.
Wow.
Underneath all that, you don't want to be the target. You don't want people
Wow.
coming after you. So
Wow,
nobody says that.
you had a similar programming. Wow. Yeah, they'll get you.
Well,
Is it what they say? Don't talk like that. They will get you. Is
they'll
kind of
get you.
yeah. And it's like, who's this
Yeah.
they? Who's this they? Anyways, keep going. Keep going.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I don't think anybody tells that to their kids unless they've been told the same thing. In some way. They've gotten that message in some way. So, it's generational. We're talking about
We're
generational
talking inner child
wounding.
healing meets generational meets Enneagram meets cult of personality meets inner work and holding space. So many
Oh my
variables.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are we trying? What are we trying to do here? But
We're
so
doing. There's no trying. We're doing.
yeah, we're doing. So, my experience was I knew as a child that there was something else going on in the world. I mean, I grew up on a farm, little farm in the Midwest, and we had this thing called a milk house, and milk house had a place you could sit outside of it. And I'd go out at night and I'd look up at the stars, and those were dark nights. Those were really dark nights that we're trying to reclaim here, in urban US. And I would be so in awe and so in wonder. And so I had that part of me that has been a thread in my life. It and it got lost for a while. I lost it at a particular time. But but what shaped me was keeping my voice down, not speaking my truth, not showing up in the way that I could for a lot of years. And it was actually with the Enneagram that I saw that also as a personality trait. Okay. So it wasn't just my upbringing, it was a part of the personality trait. And when I saw that from an Enneagram perspective, it was like, oh, then I don't have to take that as truth, because so many times, and Haas, you probably had some of this experience. I don't know, you can speak to it, that those messages, then if we internalize them, because we are these energetically very open little beings, when we're young, we haven't developed all the defenses yet of our personality, right? So we absorb a lot of our environment, and then that feels like oh, that's true. And
Mm-hmm.
so that one of the things that the Enneagram helped me with
Mm.
was, oh, what I have thought about myself, like that's who I am. That's a lie.
Mm.
That's a lie. It's not the truth. It was an experience. So we take our experiences and we make them concrete. That's one of the learnings here.
We
We take
clasp, we clench.
we clench. Yes, we clench. Yeah. And then we hold on. And we
Yeah.
hold on to it. And we say, well, I can't do that because, I'm supposed to be a nice girl.
So
Right? Or
this is
because, yeah,
fascinating because I'm now seeing what you said about an hour ago. Had you not used Enneagram to look below the surface and see these forces that were influencing you, some shaped by childhood and all these things you took in, mother, father, played small. Now I can see why Irma, let's play big. Or you have to say, yeah, I could see how all of this had to be cleared. If not, you wouldn't have accepted those invitations because they
right.
were literally preparation. Again, we're back to this like how life preps us. I love
Yeah.
this. And yes, it's intergenerational. And yes, so this sounds like it limited your potential. It curbed or suppressed your genius, your gifts, your potential. I mean, however you want to slice it or however you want to call it. Is that a fair encapsulation?
Yeah, it did. And the way I hold this is with the Enneagram that, and actually this is a Gurdjieff teaching
Hmm.
us, that when we heal our wounds, and we it may take a very long time. Who knows how many
Yeah.
we have, right? How much there is to be cleared. But as we're doing that, because we are all interconnected, I'm still very connected to my family. I mean, right, they passed, long time ago, but there's a link, and I feel like I'm healing backward.
Oh, it's a fundamental. I teach
Yeah,
ancestral healing. It's a fundamental
it
because you're a
is.
part of
Yeah.
the epigenetics. I mean, all
Yes.
science is now formulating what these ancient mystics and what you're speaking to now as a modern mystic does. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's Gurdjieffian too. So it's like so healing backwards. So I don't. I mean, I this is unusual for me to talk about my parents in this way, so publicly.
Hmm.
But
Your
what I'm,
candor and your vulnerable power.
yeah, and it is my vulnerable power. And as I'm doing that, I'm also recognizing, oh, they're being healed too. And who knows before that how many generations might be
It
healed.
sounds like that was a good time to do this thing that we didn't plan. There's gonna be a formal exercise at the end, or let's call it, and more we infused the last couple seasons exercises. So we didn't plan on this, and it came up impromptu, and I was like, yeah, let's do this. This notion of you walked me through something. I'd love to do it on camera. This notion of clenching, because you talked about how we identify out the gate an hour
Yes.
or so
Yeah.
ago. You talk about so much of these tapes, let's call it, that you took on in childhood that you had to let go. It sounds like there's a lot of Herman Hesse. People think strength is holding on. It's actually letting
Right.
go. So let's walk through a quick
Yeah.
exercise that'll also prep us for the later formal Big Daddy exercise, let's call it, or Big Mommy exercise.
Or whatever that is,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Let's talk about clenching and how we hold on in the negative way and we clasp onto identities, types, and all this. Let's do this because I feel like it's a good point in time to do it in our episode.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so as you're saying this, and we've been talking about how we hold on to our ideas about who we are, to our beliefs, to our self definition, how big or how small or how whatever we are, how great or how terrible or whatever. So we have these ideas, and then in life, there's a lot of things that we hold on to. So I would invite all of you actually to, like, what does it feel like in your body when clenching your fist, and with, like, you're holding on for dear life. You cannot let this go. Let your fists clench so hard that they almost ache. And notice, are you breathing as you do
Hmm.
this?
Hmm.
And what happens for you as you're clenching? What else is getting tight within you?
Wow.
Where else? What's happening in your neck and your shoulders and your
Wow.
jaw? In your buttocks and your toes and your, every part of your body. What's tightening up? And how's your breath? Noticing your breath. And
Shallow, dip in
yeah,
energy. Keep going. Wow.
yeah. So So we're just cutting ourselves off from life right here.
Wow.
Okay. Clenching is cutting ourselves off from life. And you might even feel
Yeah.
your
The
shoulders
collapse. There's like a
collapsing
collapsing.
and
Yeah.
yeah, like kind of going into that C shape,
Mm. Mm.
and
Very
trying
true.
to, it's like, I
My
can't let
neck,
go of
all the
this.
cerebral spinal. I mean, it feels a lot. It's very profound what you're
It
inviting.
is. Okay. So I'm going to invite you to begin to slowly loosen. So, I mean, there's still, you can feel the tips of your fingers maybe against your palms, but it's a little looser
Wow, it's trippy.
and you're letting just gently, gradually, I'm going to lovingly begin to let go. And what is it that you're letting go of? You might just ask that question of yourself. You might not have an answer, and that's fine, but there's probably something that you've been holding on to tightly, maybe an idea, a belief, a thought,
Mm,
an opinion, a perspective,
mm,
um, with a little piece of information. Maybe you have a great big idea about who somebody is,
mm,
besides yourself, just gradually opening up and
mm,
beginning to straighten out your fingers, letting your maybe even pulling so that your palms are facing up.
mm.
And
Wow. That
oh,
did something too, facing upwards. Interesting. Mm.
yeah. And you can just ask now, what could I receive
Oh,
right
interesting.
now?
One step further.
Oh,
Okay. Mm,
what could I what my hands are open.
mm,
Maybe you feel a little bit more openness in your body, in your
mm,
shoulders, your neck, your chest, your belly, your butt, your thighs, your toes, your whole being. Just maybe even move a little bit. You're like loosening up. You're loosening up. You're becoming more expansive
mm,
and you're opening to receiving. You're receiving something, some kind of a gift.
wow.
Maybe it's a new perspective, a new idea, a new, more compassion. Maybe you're opening to more the gift of courage, the gift of listening.
Mm,
There's so many gifts that are available
mm,
for each person here.
mm.
So um, I'm opening to honesty.
Wow. Mm. Yeah, it dropped me into a very deep, coherent state. For me, when I yawn, it's a sign I'm releasing energy. That's one of the
Uh,
ways I purge
yes,
energy
yeah,
commonly in ritual
yeah,
or any practices like that. It's interesting, right? Because it seems like the mechanics were obviously our natural state tends to be very constrictive. So then it was an invitation to open, and then that brought about almost like when you invited it, a very expansive, which is not natural for us to experience. And then I love that third part, almost like an extra credit because when we empty, when we let go, people don't know this about energetics. The energy will come back if you don't fill it with new energy. And I love that. That's essentially what you did. Bring
yeah,
in what do you want to receive now? And you
yes,
have to give yourself permission to receive after the letting go and
that's
the
right.
opening. So, wow. Wow, wow, wow.
That's right. So thank you for making that more explicit, Haas, about that we're bringing something in to otherwise that space inside gets filled with something else we don't want or that is no longer useful for us, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so
So let's
just
let's get
another
let's get into
piece.
this. Let's get into the Enneagrams, Roxanne 3.0, now building the book 4.0, because this topic of portals is absolutely fascinating to me. And I know we're gonna have to rewind a bit based on what you already talked about with Enneagrams. It seems like you started to see things at some point and unpack part of this birthing we were talking about early on and building upon a existing framework with Enneagram. Talk us through how you developed what is now this portals concept, what led to that. And I sense we're going to have to get through some of the lines and some of that. So let's get into that if you're comfortable doing that. And then that'll bring us into the holding, the actual holding. The
Holding,
holding of the
yeah,
holding.
the
We've been
holding of the
preparing to
holding.
hold while holding this whole time.
Exactly. And we are holding. We are currently holding. So yeah, so let me share a little bit about
Yeah.
the birthing of this. And when we get into holding, ask me about birthing in relationship to
Yeah.
holding,
Yeah.
because I may forget.
Okay.
So a colleague and my colleague is Diana Redmond, and I were preparing to do a session at the International Enneagram Conference.
Okay.
And you might remember that I said I work somatically, and Diana does too, to a large extent. So we were in my living room. We pushed all the furniture aside, and we had, I think it was like an 8x8 mat with the Enneagram on it. Now, what's really the Enneagram symbol? And we were sitting there, quietly, discerning, like, how do we want to approach the content, the subject that was going to be the focus of our session, which was paradox. And some things started to happen, which I'll tell you about.
So this is the buddy. This is one of those buddy birthing through moments. Is essentially another thing I'd like to add to hearing this. Is that correct? Remember earlier you said you did solo work, and that this seems to be an analogy what you're unpacking now of a birthing through in tandem with somebody. Is that correct?
We were together
Okay.
as this became clear. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
This
Keep
this
flowing.
piece.
Yeah. Keep
Okay.
flowing.
So one thing that's really important about this, as we move, that helps connect to this new symbol that I'm going to be talking about, is that the number 9 is very, very important in the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is, if you know the symbol, if you're familiar with it, it looks a little strange. It has a circle, and inside the circle there is a triangle, the inner triangle, and then there, also inside is this odd shaped figure called a hexad. And there's 9 points. So 9 is a very important number. The Enneagram is actually based on sacred numerology. And 9 is the only number that when you multiply it by any other number returns to itself in sacred numerology. And for those of you who maybe don't know how that might work, if you were to add up the numbers 2, 3, and 4, you would get 9. Okay. So you add up the digits to get the 9. Let's say you add up, what's it? 8, 9, and 1. And I'll just make this shortcut. You get 18. And then you take the 1 and the 8 and you add them together, 1 plus 8, and that equals 9. So that's how sacred numerology in a nutshell works. So there's,
and that's embedded in Enneagram. So it's naturally there, which is how we know it's something universal. Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely is. And so 9 is called a power number, and again, it always returns to itself. And I could another time talk about a lot of ways in which the number 9 does show up in the Enneagram. So back to this mat, we're sitting there quietly, just reflecting and seeing what comes up. And what we noticed, and I'm not quite sure how this even happened, but there is not a line, if you know the Enneagram symbol at all, that there at the bottom of the symbol, there's a 5 and a 4. Those are 2 Enneagram points. And, there's a lot of internal lines in the Enneagram, but there wasn't an internal line there, like not between the 5 and the 4. We go, I wonder what that's about. It's like there's no line there, but it's like, yeah, there is. Yeah, there kind of is a line. And oh my gosh, that 5 and 4 equals 9. Well, that's interesting. Okay, I don't know what that's about. And then we saw that there's this inner triangle in the Enneagram, and between the 6 and the 3, there's already a line. Okay, a 6 and a 3. There's already a line from the inner triangle. Oh, well, of course, we already knew that was a 9. Okay. And then above those numbers is a 2 and a 7. And there's no line there either. They've got other lines, but there's no line that connects those two. I wonder Oh my gosh, what is it? That equals 9.
Hmm.
Okay. And then, well, there's an 8 and a 1, and there's no line that connects those two numbers. What does that equal? We had another 9, like, what's going on here, right?
Hmm.
Now, I just want to say, and I'll do one more line here, that um, we didn't plan this. We didn't try to make something happen,
It dropped
but
in. You
it dropped
downloaded
in. That's right.
inspiration. Yeah. That's very beautiful
Absolutely. But
example of everything we talk about here. Yeah.
that's right. But a lot of times people don't get that. It's like, oh, did you make that up? It's like,
No,
no, I'm
you
not.
held
I'm
the
not.
space and it
I'm
came
not.
through. Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to make this up. And that's not the inner judge. It's
She's
just
an
like,
EDD, not a
no.
PhD. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Teasing you.
So
Teasing.
here's a 9 at the top of the Enneagram symbol.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's one of the 9 points, 9 Enneagram points. Well, what does it connect to? Well, it is at the top of the circle. And if you go all the way down to the bottom of the circle, there's a space between the 9 and between the 5 and the 4.
Like a void, right?
That's exactly what that is. It's the void. It's this empty space, and it is, it is the place of emptiness, of the void. And the 9, okay, so it'll be a 0. So we have a 9 and a 0. And so 9 shows up again. And so actually, I'm shaking. I think probably Diana is too. I was like, what is this? We both, having been a long background with the Enneagram, we hold it we were, with a lot of respect, sacrosanct. It's like, you don't mess with the Enneagram. Well, it felt like we were messing, or the Enneagram was being messed with. Something was being shown to us. The other thing is that, and I learned from my early teachers in the Enneagram, that the Enneagram is not just a static body of wisdom. It continues to evolve. And we know that there's just so much research even going on, neuropsychological, neurobiological. There's so much research that reflects all of the early wisdom teachings from the Enneagram. So now what? So we actually changed kind of the focus of our session for the conference. We presented this new symbol, and we were quite nervous because, like, oh my goodness, we're breaking the rules here, and a lot of feedback, intrigue, interest, questioning, encouragement, So after that, I couldn't let it alone. It wouldn't let me alone, I guess, is really the truth. It would not. This body would not let me alone. I really didn't know what it was about. I mean, we presented it using the focus of paradox, which it was beautiful for, but there's something more. So I've been working on this and studying it, writing about it, listening to it, working on an Enneagram, it's called Enneacrossings, by the way, Matt, and for years. And now at least the foundational book for it is about ready to come out this fall. And then the book is called The Four Sacred Portals. That's the main title. So these horizontal lines are portals, and they're portals into our infinite nature. The horizontal represents our finite nature. Our finite nature. And so they show us some aspect of our interior nature that when we see what some of the obstacles are in one of the portals, and as we heal, release, expand our capacities, we come into this place I call convergence, and it's like close to the intersection of this 9-0 line and the horizontal line. This 9-0 line is the line of the infinite. Okay, so we're working with these two major dimensions of life: the finite and the infinite.
Hmm.
So the four sacred portals, I'll just name them for
Real
you.
quick, before you do this, just real quick. So, okay, so right here again, you're giving us brilliant analogy of what it is like in real time to birth something, to download something, and then be like, what is this? Because you're speaking to this notion of, whoa, there's a reverence almost as I hear you. Who am I to build upon this? We don't, and there's so many people out there, myself included, that are like chain links in a great, lineage, so to speak. And you mentioned the guy who kind of created the symbol, Gurdjieff, or
He didn't create it, but he brought it forward.
I apologize.
Yes.
Yeah, I
No,
meant
that's okay.
so.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I love that because another thing I see. I mean, I experienced it myself. I sense others too. This notion of who am I to mess with this reverence
Yeah.
for the lineage, honoring it, while at the same time, maybe some of us are here to push the envelope. Because it sounds like that's what you had to overcome. Matches the inner child healing we spoke about, the intergenerational stuff. Play big when you've co-founded Deep Living Lab, and it sounds like it came through on its own. Again, we're back to these fundamental things we've touched on so many times today. It birthed through you. It wasn't you
Yeah.
concocted it. You didn't, you're not a PhD in physics and mathematics to be like, hey, let me create this. It'll
Yeah.
sound fanciful in my, which is again back to it's created through us. It's not an inner
Yes.
critic devised, an egoic device. It is birthed through you. And it takes time. There's layers or elements to it.
Oh, I had questions, lots and lots and lots of questions, and I asked it. I mean, I was like communicating with it because it's
living. It's an
I believe that it was a living entity, and it had something to share. And I was like, "What are you about? Why now? Why now are you showing yourself?"
Why did it say when it said why now? When you asked that, can you confide in us? What did it? What was the
Well,
response
the
you got
why
from it?
now is that.
Why now and why you? I'm curious. Did you get those two answers? Why now?
Well,
Why you? Yeah.
I'd say the why now actually is a parallel, I think, to what your chief was trying to share in 1916 when he introduced the symbol that he discovered to the Western world and saying, if we do not wake up to our true nature, we're going to be killing each other in the hundreds of thousands. So why now is we are in a very difficult uprooting time in the world, and a lot of all the division, the hatred, the blaming, the everything is being uprooted. We just know that's just what's going on in life, right? And
The end of
so
times as we know it. The end of times as we know it.
and that's right. And so this symbol that what I got was because now is the time. Now is the time for this more expanded way of being in the world to come forward. And that was quite profound, right? And then of course I was asking, what are your messages? What are you here to teach? What do you want to be brought into the world from you? And a lot of different messages. A fundamental one was love. Was love, and two of the other messages is you are already whole, and you are, and this is in the subtitle, and you are already kin with life. You have kinship with life now, even if you are interconnected with all of life, even though you think you're separate. So this is to break through those old cultural and personal beliefs that we have, that we've held. And I will say, I mean, I asked a lot of questions, and I asked, how are you here to heal? What do you have to bring to the world? And it was really these messages, like, and there's a way of doing it. And this is also so very exciting because these portals, and I'm going to say mostly with the portals, they intersect with, of course, with the infinite, which is a whole big thing in itself. But the portals are actually kind of a map for how we can be in the world. This is really important for leaders, for all of us, but for leaders. And the first portal is called holding, say the portal of sacred holding. We're going to talk about that. We're going to focus on that as much as we can. The second portal is the portal of sacred trust. Okay. The third portal. So you see, we're starting foundation and holding, from our earliest moments, like how are we holding ourselves now? Trust. Okay. So I'm learning, I'm developing the capacity to hold myself and be able to hold others. So now what do I trust? And do I trust my own path? Do I trust my own journey? Because if we look at it from the ego, there's not a whole lot to trust from our ego perspective, right? It's like everything's falling apart. I don't know. Everything changes. Everything's changing all the time. So let's talk about the dynamism in the world, that in life, and what do I trust in this moment? It's all about in this moment. It's all about being present. So developing that capacity for sacred trust. And then the third one is, okay, now we're expanding even more the portal of sacred connectedness. What is from the heart? And we have one of the things I write about was, which heart are we talking about? Because there's different versions of the heart. And so how do I deepen my experience, my actual experience, felt experience with my heart, so that I can connect with Haas's heart, and in a real way, not a made up thing, or with the heart of those of you listening or viewing this, or with the heart of how do I connect with the world around me, with the environment, with the earth. Okay, so it's like nothing's left out. I say, is there anything outside of sacred connectedness? The answer is no. Everything has sacred connectedness. And then the fourth portal is called the portal of sacred engagement. How do we live this in the world? So these are all capacities that we're developing in these portals that help us bring this, what we are being called to do in the world. What are we being called? And so working with these portals also helps us to attune to ourselves, so that we can hear more clearly, what am I being called to? And so the subtitle of this book is Meeting What Calls You, a Journey of Wholeness and Kinship with Life. Not a journey to, it's a journey of. We are already whole, and we already are kin with life.
So I love this because you brought it out. We're knee deep into mystical components of the inner work, because this living, breathing system, a multidimensional technology, I'll call it, because the Enneagram, as you said earlier, has sacred geometry mapped into it. I believe you said before, not in this episode, that it maps across the energy bodies and the chakra systems of the ancient mystics there and spiritual scientists. I've mentioned this to you before offline, that Nikola Tesla called it the fingerprint of God. 369 appear everywhere. Here you are talking about 9. This is how we know these are divinely universal natural technologies that are there. And it seems like when you say portal, very powerful word used, and you're using it, I sense, very intentionally. It sounds like entry point, gateway, access point, different ways of saying it, within ourselves to do this deep inner work. And that unlocks holding, trust, connectedness, presence, and even building beyond that. It sounds like you graduate, you evolve, you expand and grow, and you hold more capacities. More of this stuff comes online.
And the more that we work with whatever it is that's in these portals, and each portal has a very specific orientation and obstacles that can get in the way to our real capacity, the space that we hold for any of these qualities that we want to bring out, or any of these actions that we want to bring out, is that we move into this area called convergence, and the convergence is with the infinite. So we are never separate from the infinite. We're never separate from the finite. We are both, and they are so often seen as separate, and that creates a lot of problems in life. That's another way of dividing ourselves up. and having more division in the world. That's the reason I can, you're asking me about what I would suggest about tolerance. It's like, well, it's obvious we're connected, I'm connected to this person that I'm having a hard time with. There's something that I'm to learn or to offer, or there's something there. And I have to listen in. What is that attunement within me that says, what is the direction now? What is the next step? And we don't have to know that at the outset. We can't know it at the outset because this is a convergence into another way of being in the world.
It sounds
it's
like
another way of being.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it also restores your natural settings, or what I would call the natural blueprint, because it's like you're restoring your holding. Your capacity to hold is the fundamental. We're going to get into, and we've already started to unpack so much of it. Trust, you're speaking to it. Connectedness, it's brings us back to who we were, the wholeness, awakening from the personality and these grooves, so that we can then do this next part of transcending what you spoke about earlier, potential, higher capacities, these gifts, the geniuses. How do we then bring through what we're supposed to birth through or bring forth?
Yeah. So there's this, actually, I see it as an integration, that we don't leave any of this behind to go someplace else. We are integrating that all, so that we bring it all with in our next steps, whatever those might be, Haas. And you use, and I can't remember exact words you just said, but I see this as a regenerative map, because it, rather than draining us, pulling from us, it actually nourishes us. It nourishes each of these capacities within us on a continual basis. So these four portals, I mean, I use these portals all the time in my life. Sometimes I might just need to focus on one of them, like trust or something. But sometimes I need to go through all four, just like, what am I to be bringing? What's my next step here in the sacred engagement? So, and every time we enter in, we are building the whole system. We are nourishing the whole system. So it's a regenerative.
You're almost bolstering your wholeness. I'll say it in that way, right?
Yeah.
I'm whole. I'm whole. So holding it, trusting it, feeling the interconnection, and then you can engage with life from that way. And then, yes, tolerance is addressed that way, because then you're no longer going to have difficulty with cruelty or imbalance, because you're going to deal with the inner cruelty and the imbalance first, I sense, through this work. So holding as the foundation of it all. Now that we're in knee deep, I mean, we've peppered it in earlier. We did start with this exercise of the clenching is one way to look at the mechanics, I sense, of the energetics of releasing, right? Is because you kind of start to allow and then it dissipates on its own. So let's get into this more cogently, using holding to cultivate and potential, whatever you want to call it, holding, sacred holding. How do we want to get into it? The
well,
home
let me
stretch
just
of this.
let me just give a little context here
about
what holding is.
Yes, ma'am. And what it is, and what it isn't.
What it is, because that's what people, what is holding? And it's such a great question, because most of us, I mean, it's not a term that we use it in vernacular ways. But like, what's sacred holding, right? Like, What do you mean by that?
Even holding space, as I said, the outset of today, 2 hours ago. What does it mean? And we hear it everywhere. I have a protege who jokes. He was on the third season. He said, I hate hearing containment, holding, because nobody defines what it is. So here we are about to define it.
Yeah. Well, so we have been in a holding environment since we were in the womb, and probably long before, but in this lifetime, okay, let's stay with that, that in the womb, we were nourished, and so that we could then grow and thrive and be born. And actually, I call the sacred holding the birth portal, because it really relates to what happens, what's already within us from those early moments. And that is that the purpose of the holding environment is to provide a sense of nourishment, caring and love, a sense of safety and security, the second thing. And the third thing is a sense of belonging. those three functions are what the holding environment is supposed to provide us from the time we are born. And so we all had holding environments. And some of those holding environments were really quite healthy and supportive and nourishing and gave us something, gave us quite a bit in terms of meeting those needs. A lot of people, and probably more than we might know, don't feel like they had much support in that holding environment. And I would say for almost across the board that people would say, well, I was taken care of. I was loved. They kept me safe, and
were
I
you
had this
held?
yeah, and that's right, and I was kind of belonged. I don't know. Did I feel like I belonged or not? But you had enough that you're here, right?
Correct.
You're here, you're functioning. And for those who didn't have enough, functioning becomes very, very, very challenging for them. Okay. So those are the three basic needs to be met in our holding environment. Now, as we grow through life, who supported, who offered that and fed those needs through life? Well, we looked outside of ourselves, right? I looked at, whoever the caretakers were, and
which is what we were talking about earlier, right? Why I brought it up: the mom, the dad, the holding environment, that imprint.
The holding environment. That's right. And so that's right. So there's an imprint that we will get those needs met outside of ourselves. And so we look outside of ourselves. So we continue through life. Teenagers, who do we get? We still have those needs. Where do we get those met? Well, we get them from our peers, maybe, or maybe from an auntie that was really supportive in some ways, and or maybe from the coach, or maybe from from different sources. But we're looking externally. We haven't yet learned how to bring these in and learn how to hold ourselves. In other words, how we give ourselves, how we meet these needs within ourselves.
So giving ourselves nourishment, self-love, belonging, and safety.
That's right. So, and that's part of the journey of of adulthood. Actually, it's part of the journey of learning that, and it's profoundly foundational work. It's profoundly personal work, and it has so much to do with how we relate to everybody else. Because if we're trying to get those needs met from our coworker, from our staff, from the CEO, from the principal, we're always going to be.
So you were talking about something along the lines of sourcing, is what we'll call it for now, is how we look outside of ourselves.
Yeah. So we have this imprint from as we were children and taking all this information in from others, that's how we were trained. That's how we were getting those needs met to whatever degree. So we continue to look outside of ourselves to still get those needs met. Those needs don't go away. They are still present. And, but we're not typically conscious of them. Most of us wouldn't say, well, I joined this group so that I could feel more like a sense of belonging, or I could feel like I'm loved and nurtured, or that I'm safer here. We might use some of that language, but, typically we're not connected to this imprint. So the imprint exists. And what is really fantastic in terms of, what you're trying to do, what you're doing, Haas, with human technology, is that we are bringing the imprint from invisible to visible. And we're saying, oh, this actually is something that has been driving me in ways that I haven't even recognized, or it's been active within me. And what that does, it takes our power away from us. It keeps us off center. We are looking to those external sources, and I can guarantee you that you're going to be disappointed by those external sources at some point, and maybe quite often.
I mean, you said what I was thinking all along the last few minutes when you were speaking to this, this notion of you're seeking it from people who they themselves do not have this capacity and or information. And when
That's
we're
right.
speaking about our mothers earlier, now the audience can probably see the interconnect of how not only does that shape us, we learn how to hold, and it seems like it is. I'll say it this way. When I say this to my mother, my biological mother, she says, we didn't have this information, right? And
That's
so
right.
right there, your wording of you creating a movement, you're birthing a movement. Why you? Why now? Gurdjieff, we need to awaken from personality to really transcend. I'm, butchering his quote, of course. So there seems to be what you're bringing forth, whether it be looking at it as a micro level of the Enneagram, Enya crossings, sacred holding, your new book, this curriculum, helping us go within to make the unseen seen. And then
That's right.
likewise, like my mother said, we didn't know this stuff. So you're going to seek it from people that equally in a burnout epidemic, in a new self-help uptick fad. I mean, all the stuff we've implicitly touched on without touching on it, undertones of, here and there. I love it because I sense, yeah, you have to source it from within. And it's maybe this Gandhi-esque quote of be the change. And I think that's where we're headed with the rest of today is how can we be the change by changing how we see holding? Let me put it that way. That's kind of what's coming out of my mouth, right? And you're
Yeah.
seemingly bringing that forward more and more today in the book, in your work, what you're downloading and building is how do we hold more effectively so we can show up for life?
Well, another point in that is that as long as we're looking outside of ourselves, we are living in a blame
Ooh.
mentality,
Mm.
right? We're also living in a victim mentality because it's like we're looking to have something done to us. In a way, that goes back to the fixing, doesn't it?
Mm.
Like, oh, they will fix me. I always
If
had that.
only then, if only
Yeah,
they did this and I
yes,
will be this.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then we blame, and you're so correct that those that came before us didn't have this information. They had no idea about it. So it doesn't really, what is it? What is the result of blaming? It doesn't help us grow. We stay small, we stay constricted, and it certainly doesn't help anyone else, those that come before us. So how can we then start shifting and recognizing? So this comes back to the value of becoming aware, becoming more conscious that, oh, these factors are within me. And now I have the responsibility, I have the power, I have
Hmm.
really the opportunity, I have the gift of
Mhm.
bringing that back within. So there's a shift, you see, in our
Mm.
mentality and in how we're relating to these needs. So there's that shift the word empower is used so often and overused, but in this case, it really is something
Bring the
that
power within.
that's right.
Empower. Bring the
That's
power within.
That's exactly it. And to recognize that we already have the capacity within, we just need to know about it and then bring attention to it. Because if it doesn't get attention, it won't regenerate, it won't thrive, it won't grow.
Well, let's slow this down because this goes back to potential. The it is potential. I'll substitute that in your formulation. It is the potential will not thrive. So what I'm hearing from you is Haas, if you're telling me, Haas, if I hold myself, I can be in a centered state. That first portal that we're speaking about, the foundation of a lot of this inner work, then I can cultivate the potential. Then that potential can thrive. Does that more or less encapsulate what the holding brings about? In other words, by holding ourselves, we start to bring forth the potential and these gifts.
Well, we do. And we also then have the capacity. So, just to say capacity, I see capacity. I think you might have mentioned this as
Yeah.
space that we haven't maybe known that we have that potential within us, that we can nourish the space within us for that potential,
Mm.
and to allow those elements within us to take hold, take root. Yeah, and we're talking about this portal goes across the belly center. We're talking about our grounding. We're talking about the ground of being. We're talking about the ground of the earth. that we're connected to. So this is our fundamental connectedness to ourselves, to come back home to this place without giving that all away. And it doesn't mean that we don't still have our friends, and we might not get nurturing, and we might not get a sense of belonging. We might not get a sense of safety from others. That's great. I hope we do. I mean, that's what we could do for each other. But if we're counting on others to provide that for us, then we are putting ourselves at risk, really. We're putting ourselves in a very disempowered situation.
It won't, and it's futile because it sounds like it's never going to happen. At least if it were to happen, it would have happened by now in the collective. It sounds like there's a mechanism you're bringing forth in this, because I'm hearing two things, and it's fascinating me in the multidimensional sense. It sounds like what you're saying is the holding allows us, it's much like nourishing the space within. So the holding is like, here's the pot. And then you even said it allows the potential to take root and be watered almost. So it sounds like what you're speaking to, the second point, is what I've learned in the spiritual sciences is the sacred womb chakra. This almost our capacity, male and female, it doesn't matter if we're physically have a womb or not, that we have this energetic container in our body, our energy body, and you even spoke to where our chakras are, right? Holding is in the sacral solar plexus, Haas. So it seems like that's where we're headed. Very mystical, multidimensional place to be taking inner work. And that's why I teed you up by saying what you're bringing through is very practical mysticism, in a very simplistic way, I sense. Very potent, multidimensional, simplistic as we're unpacking. What else? What else in terms of this inner nourishing potential? And then what I mean by that is bringing it back to potential gifts and rising up, so to speak, or transcending and bringing through more of ourselves, let's say.
Well, I think that this is an embodiment. We can think of it in that way, and you can see why it's called the birth portal too, just because of what you're saying. So I'm not seeing this as a transcending portal. I'm saying it's an embodiment that allows us to continue to expand and still connect with ourselves.
So not going out, going in deeper. Hence,
we're going in deeper.
Embody. Okay.
Yeah, embodied, and it is from here that my sense, way I experience is it being at home in myself. I'm aligned. I can connect with myself. This is a very powerful process of like recognizing that I've had this all along, but when I give it away, when I put the hose into my belly and I send it out looking for other people to put the water in, others, then I'm off balance and I can't find my home. And one of the things I hear from people all the time is, how do I return to my core? How do I return? How do I get a sense of home? And this is the initial place. Each of the portals builds on that in its own way, but this is the foundation. And if we don't have this foundation, it is very hard to trust the unfolding in life, the complexity of life, the dynamism of life, because things are always changing.
Portal, which is the second.
That's the second portal.
Leaning Tower of Pisa effect. If this initial holding is not mastered, if it's theorized, not embodied, which you corrected me on, we're not trying to go out, we're trying to go in deeper. Yeah, it sounds like you won't have trust. Let me guess, connection is next. You won't be able to then sacredly engage, and your whole foundation will be wobbly.
That's right. It's right. It's like having a very weak, you're putting a mansion of some kind on the foundation of a teepee or of a tent. There's very little foundation there. And, we can practice yoga and we can do, a lot of body work and never really come into contact with this particular piece. So this has implications for healing professionals, for leaders, for teachers, for parents, for anyone who wants to help create an environment of a healthy environment for others, to have that healthy environment, that sacred holding within themselves. And then from there, wow,
I
I
love
can,
the ultimate, right? You feel whole at your home at your within yourself, and that addresses what everybody's seeking, right? We're running from well to well, remaining thirsty. You gotta like give it to yourself. And since you mentioned mystery schools earlier, it sounds like this is like, in high school and the traditional, American system, you go to different classes and there's that homeroom. It sounds like it's
yeah.
same in mystery schools. You can't, or in ascension sciences, you can't jump seals of initiation if you can't hold that light, that energy. If you can't, sounds like whatever way you want to paraphrase it, it sounds like this is the homeroom. The homeroom is
No,
holding, and you don't feel
yeah,
alone anymore. I would echo
yeah,
this. Before I met you, I wouldn't call it holding. Since we've connected, about a year now, almost like under eight or so months, I'd say I've had the good fortune of knowing you, and here we are. I'd say, yeah, this I can attest to this, Roxanne. This is what I had been missing, and this clicked for me. And you're speaking to something that needs to be digested, practiced, and embodied. And how do we practice it? How do we bring these unconscious ways we hold outside of ourselves to the forefront? Hint, hint. I sense there's an exercise brewing and or flavors of ways we hold the brewing.
well, let me just say that there's
Yeah.
some really, um, what also really supports, and we'll do an exercise, but really supports as well as, nature,
Mm,
being connected to nature as a fundamental, I mean, the earth being our home,
mm,
we're made of not only stardust, but also, the earth,
mm.
and which is stardust. And so to be able to really feel that energy of the earth, and I like just laying down on the earth and feeling the energy of it, and letting myself be held by the earth, because that Mother Earth can hold us, if we'll allow it. So
Is that
that's,
sacred holding? Is that what you mean by sacred holding? Something else holds us, which is one step
well,
above. We haven't really gotten into it. I'm more
no, it's a fundamental. I mean, we are held by the earth. If we
okay.
pay, we pay attention, we walk, we're connected magnetically,
Right.
by the earth, to the earth, with the earth.
Right.
And so uh, it is a support system, right? To say the least, and to connect our own physicality with the physicality of the earth is a very powerful support for holding. So you know, we can also talk about how we get held in a very healthy way, and the earth can do that. When we were preparing long ago for this, I did an exercise with how holding can feel in the body.
Hmm.
Do you want to do that?
All right,
Do
let's
you think
start with
that?
that and then go into the noticing one too. I think is this the one where you said here are the unconscious ways we hold, like holding in, holding down. I I,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's the amuse bouche, and then take us into the how do we start to hold noticing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I like
So
this is
this
the
is
amuse
an
bouche because this is a fun one. Yeah.
okay. So this is a noticing exercise, and it invites us to really come into contact with our sensations. So, if you want to just kind of shake things out a little bit in your body and breathe, really just, yeah. Did you hear that noise that Ash just made? That's really great. You want to make some noise when when you're breathing. Oh,
No complaints have
yeah.
ever been made that Haas is not noisy.
so so as we in this experience of learning about holding, it's mostly somatic. In many ways it's a somatic holding that we experience, and our bodies know about this long before we know about it intellectually. So I just invite you to kind of play with this, like, and there's no right or wrong answer, right or wrong way to be with it. You may find that there's several ways that your body holds. So let me just give you a few examples, and we'll take a little bit of time to feel into it. Okay. So one way that we might hold ourselves is that we hold ourselves down. We hold ourselves down. And, this might be a suppression of your voice, a suppression of your emotions, or you bite your tongue. It's like, what would that feel like? You're holding yourself down, and I can kind of feel my belly is moving Oh, up here.
I feel it's almost like atlasy, shoulders, weight, throat constriction. So it's interesting you saying solar plexus because I would say they too correlate energetically. Yeah.
Well, they do. They do.
Yeah.
It all, yes, yes. I could feel like going concave in
Ah,
my
interesting. Yeah.
belly. So you're
Mine is
like
almost
holding
like I'm
my,
being held down. Like,
yeah, and that could be too, like, or from your shoulders,
yeah.
being held down.
Mm,
So just feel into that and how that affects you. And one of the reasons we want to look at this is this becomes a strategy
mm,
for trying to either protect a sense of love, protect a sense of security, protect a sense of belonging.
mm,
So if I hold myself down, I might not want to say something because I'm afraid I'll be cut off from
mm,
belonging.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
Okay, that's an example.
The weightedness. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you hold yourself up? Oh, like what would that be? Holding yourself up.
Mm, mm,
And what happens in your body? Like you
mm,
see that my shoulders are moving up into my ears, I'm kind of moving up out of the chair.
mm.
My
So I feel it in the root and sacral as if the opposite of what we're talking about today. I don't feel I'm naturally held, so I have to hold the root up.
You have to hold it up. Yeah. And I feel my cheeks like
Oh,
holding
glutes, a
tight.
lot of
It's
glutes.
a
Yeah.
lot of glutes in there, tightening up and holding
Yeah.
up. So what are you holding up? What is there something that you're trying to prove, show people that you can? What's associated with holding up? Is there some kind of belonging, some kind of valuing, being valued? Um, is there some kind of way there's security in
Mm,
holding yourself up?
mm,
Like perhaps you feel more ready
mm.
for
And you have to
action.
be that way. Yeah. It's very hypervigilant sense. It doesn't feel
Yeah,
cohesive. Yeah.
no, yeah. So just bring yourself back into contact with being here in your core right now. Okay, so there's also, I'm just going to add this in. So, how do you hold others up?
Mm.
How do you hold others up? Is there a sense that you have a sense of responsibility that
The hand.
is yeah, on your shoulders, in your hand? Let's say that again.
I feel like it's fast. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject. I said pop that. Sorry. It's hands. And then I'm picking up, why do I have to hold them with my hands when I can hold them with my energy?
Yeah. And sometimes it might be an organization trying to hold up a family, hold it up, a group. Like, do you feel like you are looked to be able to hold up a particular entity outside of
Interesting.
yourself?
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Ah, ah, what's that like?
Hmm. So these are like flavors of how we're conditioned to hold, or presumptions, or identifications, or clenching ways we hold, so to speak. Keep it flowing,
Yeah,
Maestro.
yeah. So, how do you hold yourself by pushing out? Just like, so do you hold yourself by pushing out? So I've got my hands pushing outward. I find myself pivoting forward. What are you noticing?
Tightness in the back, metaphysically. Lower middle back. Yeah.
Lower middle back. Okay. So, and what might we be pushing out? Um, Something that we think we can't handle,
Hmm.
something that feels threatening or scary? Is there something is this a way of protecting
Hmm.
ourselves in some way? One of those three needs, getting one of those three needs protected.
Interesting.
And boy, as I'm pushing out, I feel it in my thighs. I'm like pushing. I can feel that my thighs tightening.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Um, Here's one. How do you hold off? Is there any way that you hold off?
It's
What
like
does that feel like?
back one, backing away.
Backing away. Yeah. And what am I holding off from? Don't want to commit, don't want to make a decision, um, don't want to interact, don't want to deal with.
Hmm. Avoidant. Yeah, it's like off center. Back to that power thing we were speaking about earlier. It's almost like you're avoiding the power center.
Yeah, yeah,
Potentially, yeah.
yeah. There may be something that you're trying to delay.
Mm.
Because, and again, just sense into, does this have anything with trying to protect your sense of safety, for
Mm.
example, or sense of belonging,
Mm.
sense of being loved, and nurtured?
Mm.
Hmm. Um, I'm just going to do one more
Yeah.
here, and that is, and we've talked about this but this is a little different context. How do you hold on?
See, I kind of went back to like clenching, only my hands. Yeah, very solar plexus-y for me on this one.
Ah, yeah,
I
yeah.
only had the
So
epiphany within this last year that I used to clench, probably why I had such good abs when I was a infant or in elementary, because I used to clench, which we're now learning is polyvagal and it's constrictive state. So
yes,
that's what almost what I feel like when you said holding on. It's like, oh
yeah,
God, I gotta hold on. I gotta brace,
yeah,
bracing.
yeah, yeah. I think about this very much in the military stance.
Yeah,
People in the military develop this stance like holding on. A lot of these are a lot of holding.
yeah.
Holding up, holding it to. Here's what we didn't talk about:
Mm.
holding it together.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, holding it together.
A
For
lot
what
on the,
purpose?
lot on the heart. I feel on that
Yeah,
one. Yeah. I feel
yeah,
like that matches, right? Society holding together. Don't let the emotion show. Don't be vulnerable in your power. Like hold it together, Haas.
yeah, 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 yeah. Exactly. Shake out. So, this just gives a glimpse into how our bodies internalize the holding process and how our bodies, which are so intelligent,
Mm,
try to protect us in some way from losing nurturing, losing safety, security, losing a sense of belonging. I mean, I
that's that
really,
coping mechanism patterns, aka.
it is. And what, I have such respect for the body because this is what it knows how to do. And again, we're bringing the held
Mm,
experience in the body to the invisible, or what we haven't known about it, into visibility, into awareness, into our somatic visibility. We could say, to recognize, oh, when you might you catch yourself
mm,
just going about your day, you getting up in the morning, and how are you holding yourself? They're doing it from almost the time you get up
mm.
until you go to bed, and then maybe even in bed, even when you're trying to sleep.
Which is
This
probably
holding
why
means
people have such bad. I mean, there's so many implications, right? The biophysical, the circadian rhythm level, the mental constrictions and lack of creativity, emotional constrictions. So
yeah,
this seems to be then, I mean, Enneagram, the way it is used, the way you've developed this curriculum, we get back to this theme of going under the iceberg, making the invisible visible, seeing these unseen forces that are interplaying, and then mastering how to then churn inwards. Where's the unconsciousness? What's ingrained in how to hold not healthy ways, let's say all the ways you've covered in terms of
yes,
coaching. And then it seems like then you transition to being properly held. And that's when a
uh,
lot of magic happens. And is that what you mean then by sacred holding?
that's what sacred holding is. It's when we learn to hold ourselves in a respectful, loving, compassionate, belonging, safe way. And that sacred, the reason I call it sacred
Hmm.
is because it, it's a sacred process. It's a sacred journey to come back into ourselves, come back into our capacities, come back into our potentiality, come back into contact with the capacity that allows us to respond to what we're called to do in life, how we're called to grow, how we're called to embody, how we're called to love.
Hmm.
It's all connected. It's all connected. And so sacred holding is starts the development of an internal coherence,
Hmm.
where we feel like, oh, this is all of a one. It's all of a one, all the way through our ascendant way of being, our ascendancy, right? It's all of one, that coherence, because many times we feel like that fragmentation, disconnectedness, inner division. We don't feel like we're all of one. And so we can develop that experience, and it takes some practice. And you know what? It's so doable. I mean, it's such a practical thing. It just takes some practice and attention.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, so properly feeling health allows us to step into this higher vibe state, let's call it. This feeling truly fulfilled. We're sourcing nourishment from within. And that's the pot that starts to then ripen and potential takes root in, let's say.
Yeah, this is where the root, takes hold. This is where the plants, you tend to those plants, that inner plant, that inner treasure, and you feed it, you nourish it, you bring it, you bring attention to it, you practice bringing more attention to it.
Can we taste it together
we
and
can
wrap up
taste
on
it. We
it
could,
right
we
now?
can taste it. Yeah, and part of this is relaxing.
Oh yeah, that's what the
Relaxing
audience is
it.
about to experience. So whether you want to hold yourself for deep inner work, which we're going to unpack throughout this season, or hey, look, I want to relax. It's a high stress environment. VUCA is off the charts, right? Highest flux in modern society ever, right? Peak novelty theory. So how do we do it? Where do we start? We've already
Well,
begun.
I would, yes, we have. We've been moving into this, even just with doing all those exercises around how we hold in our body. That is an invitation to, just even pause to start with. Just pause and notice. And you can close your eyes if you like. If you want to put a hand on your belly, a hand on your heart, because this is all part of who you are. And just noticing what's here right now and how you are experiencing your relationship, your fundamental relationship to your belly. And, it may be that this isn't something that you've done much of, you have a lot of practice with. So just trust that as you bring attention here into your belly and soften, no expectations, nothing to fix, nothing to change, just bringing your attention here into your belly and breathing in. That this provides, perhaps right now, very invisible experience. Perhaps you have some experience, some sensation. Letting yourself settle in. And as we're practicing moving into the sacredness of holding ourselves, we might notice, as we've been exploring today in this session, how we tend to hold on to things, our ideas about who we are, ideas about maybe who others are. Hold on to definitions, to roles, to some way to define ourselves. Maybe we hold on to who we think we're supposed to be. And as you breathe and allow this energy of breath, the movement of the chi within you, the movement really of life within you, just noticing if there's anything that feels you might be okay with just letting go of, even just a little, anything that you've been holding on to, anything that has been reinforcing a sense of you that probably isn't all of who you are. Just inviting yourself in. If there's something that you're letting go of, what would you like to invite in? And as you're doing that, you can begin to sense into perhaps a different kind of relationship with yourself. Relationship with your physical nature, your belly, your breath, your sensations. And maybe even with your connection to the ground, to the earth. Inviting in this, maybe yet unknown relationship with this physicality that you are. And perhaps you can invite in greater respect for this physical being that you are, greater compassion, a greater sense of being here and becoming the source for holding yourself. Is there anything else you might be willing to release right now to become the source of your own holding? Letting go of perhaps others that you've looked to this holding. Maybe letting them off the hook. Taking this on for yourself as a sense of your own internal power. And with more connection to your inner power, holding yourself, perhaps you'll notice that there's an energy that is expanding within you, a capacity, not only for holding you, but for providing holding for others, providing the space for others to experience their own power, their own inner authority, their own resilience, letting others have that experience for themselves. Creating the spaciousness in the environment that you are in. And perhaps this is energy of your own internal holding opens, expands, releasing any unneeded tightness or tension in your body right now. Maybe feeling that your skin is not so solid, but that your energy can flow through it and you can receive energy from it as well. You know, this sense that it's a flexible membrane Yeah, that does provide a protection for all that it holds internally. But this energy that is yours within you, and that the connection with breath and chi further supports. Perhaps you can just let go into a sense of being held by something else. It might be the ground, the earth, letting yourself just be here. Might be the ground of being itself, being held by universal energy. So allowing this energy, however you might experience it, to be here for you. You can access it at any time as you soften into yourself, relax, let go. Allow in your own authority and resilience, safety, love, belonging. May you return to it often. Thank you.
You know, I did 5-MeO DMT, very powerful plant medicine, which is one of the roots used in ayahuasca, with a very high-ranking occultist member of the Illuminati, shall we call it? Not that there is one secret society. And literally, I have come to say to people more and more, we need to activate these things endogenously. Not that there's anything wrong with outside tools. Even Enneagram can only take us so far. You can only theorize holding until you tap into it. And I would say last week, I had akin to what you guided us through, which again, we can call it samadhi in the Vedic, the descent of grace according to the Christian mysticism or Yeshua ben Yosef, this notion of something taps in, we tune in, we are literally in this web of life. We are feeling loved and loving and lovable. So thank you. I share all of that to say, we can do it for ourselves.
Yes,
We
we
don't
can.
have to seek these external tools. Not again that there's anything wrong with them, because that's what I sense we've been
Yeah.
working through, right? Is this
Yeah.
notion of then you have the trust to allow more of it next time. You can come back to this recording, do it again and again, and every time more. Then you have more inner connection, which is what is that somatic, and then you ultimately can show up with that engagement, which is the fourth portal that you were speaking about, if I'm not mistaken. So
That's
I have
right.
experienced the theory we have walked through, as have
Yes.
you, the
Yes.
listeners, that Master Roxanne is bringing forth in this movement. And the Deep Living Lab is one, let's say, vehicle or instrument of it, of looking within ourselves for what we're seeking outside of ourselves all along, and giving that sweet, sweet nectar of wholeness that's always been there all along, waiting for us. Any parting words? Beautifully, beautifully. I mean, if ever there was a mic drop, I shouldn't have said anything. I could have been like, and see you all later. I mean, left. Anything you'd like to wrap up to bring this home? Not that we aren't home. I feel home to
Mm.
literally bring us home episode wise.
I just one thing
Yeah.
that I've been told by others
Mm,
who've gone through this,
mm,
the whole series of portals, the whole Any
mm,
crossings. This is the Any crossing symbol. Just bringing it back to that. That this is such an organic process
mm-hmm.
that people who don't know anything about this map actually have experienced this. And like you're saying, Haas, and so they just hadn't been able to name it. And there is great power in being able, we have to be cautious because we don't even
You don't
grab
want to
onto
attach
it.
to the story at the same time. Bringing the unconscious conscious has a
That's
lot
right.
of
And
power.
naming it. And it's
Correct.
like, oh, this actually exists in the universe.
Did you
So
Did you know this? Sorry to interject. I know you're still flow. Did you know that in black magic or demonology, in energetic protection, if you know the name of the external inorganic virus, you actually have power over it? Did you know that? So
Hmm.
that's I want to interject because there is a lot of power
Wow.
in naming, power of words. So you were flowing. Sorry, Maestro. You were flowing, bringing the name to it is what you were saying.
Yeah, bringing the name. And um, my wish for all of you is that this supports you in your life. It supports you in your leadership, and it supports the world becoming more loving,
Mm.
um, accessing wholeness, recognize the kinship with all that is, because that's who you are. That's who you are. So all blessings to you. And thank you so much, Haas, for having me. This has been so much fun. I love it.
It's been fun even with the obstacles that we've
Yeah.
brought within and seen outside. I mean, I'm so glad that we did this. Hopefully we can do it again because I'm really glad that you here, let's say, cleared these early life imprints that mold the systems as we've been talking about and then the personality patterns and the grooves because I'm really glad you embrace your wholeness to bring forth your gifts and genius, to be able to birth through, feel safe enough to hold yourself, to then hold this curriculum, to then hold the space here now, to then bring it forth here now, because so many people feel unsafe. So many people aren't
No,
owning their power. So many people are
no.
suppressing, playing small. So many people are stepping out of love because they're choosing and don't know any better. And what a beautiful way to wrap us up with that blessing
Thank
and
you.
that invitation, Roxanne. So thank you for being here, Roxanne. If you don't know, you can find out more below. We're only getting started on season 5, people. He's a spicy meatball with a Roxanne. We'll be having a lot more in the 5 episodes ahead, and we'll be wrapping up this season with a Deep Living Lab sandwich with Marsha Hyatt, one of the facilitators at the last episode. So there'll be more Deep Living Lab. If you loved it, in store this season, make sure you tune in for the weeks to come. And we assure you that if you do practice the holding more and more, you'll achieve more self-awareness. You'll see how you have that self-mastery, that power within you, and we hope that it'll enliven you. It'll help you hold space for yourself, for life, and in your leadership, as Roxanne said. So with love and blessings, on behalf of myself, Roxanne, and the upcoming guests, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back again soon.